Good evening, and welcome to the Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, November 9th, 2022. The meeting is now called to order. And staff, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Thomas.
Present.
Commissioner Raspy.
Here.
Commissioner Janoff.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Vice Chair Barnett.
Here.
Chair Hansen.
Here as well.
And let the record show that Commissioner Tavana is absent.
Thank you for that. And staff, I will leave it with you to address the rules of civility and decorum for our town public meetings.
The public is welcome to participate in the meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meeting is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. For the benefit of the entire community, the Town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the agenda. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at board, commission, or committee meetings. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at board, commission, or committee meetings. All public comments at the board, commission, or committee meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the chair may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the commissioners exiting the chamber or meeting room. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the commissioners would return to the chamber or meeting room and the chair would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a board, commission, or committee meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code, Section 403.
And thank you for that. And we will go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is verbal communications. The Town of Los Gatos strongly encourages public participation in its public meetings, and there are a number of ways to participate. First is through written communications. Written communications received through staff are always welcome and helpful to this planning commission. And then there are two opportunities to speak in verbal communications. The first is at this point in the meeting when we ask members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. And then there's also an opportunity to speak on items that are on the agenda during those items when they're occurring during the public hearing process. If you wish to speak in verbal communications, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And the procedure for accessing the opportunity to do verbal communications is outlined in the staff in the agenda, but you can either raise your hand on Zoom or you can use the procedure via telephone for Zoom or calling in directly. So is there anyone that would like to speak in verbal communications on items that are not on the agenda?
If you would like to speak on an item that's not on the agenda, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, very good. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent calendar. any member of the public or the planning commission is able to pull any items from the consent calendar for consideration during a regular public hearing. We have two items on the consent calendar for this evening. The first is the draft minutes of our last planning commission meeting of September 28th, 2022. And then secondly, we have the annual review of the approved conditional use permit for an existing private school, which is Hillbrook School, which is something that we've been doing for many years now since the conditional use permit was approved. And so those are the two items on the consent calendar. And I'd like to ask if any member of the planning commission or the public would like to pull this item for consideration, either item for consideration during the regular meeting. Vice Chair Barnett.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I am not asking for items to be pulled, but as to item 2, I do have a conflict of interest based on proximity to the property and therefore will not be participating on that item.
Okay. In consulting with the town attorney, it does appear that you can vote on the consent calendar with the recusal of the second item. So if you, we don't need to take a separate vote on each item. We can just vote on the consent calendar and your vote would count as a recusal. Did I get that right, town attorney?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. All right. Very good. And thank you for that, Vice Chair. And then are there any commissioners that had any recommended changes to the minutes before we call the question? I don't see anyone. Okay, so we will call the question via roll call vote, and please answer yes, no, or abstain. And I will start with Commissioner Respi.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes, with abstention as to item 2.
And I vote yes as well. So the motion passes unanimously. And with the abstention of our vice chair on item 2. So then we will move on to the public hearings portion of the meeting. And we have 2 items for public hearings this evening. And the first one is consider an appeal of a community development director decision to deny a fence height exception request for construction of a 6-foot tall fencing located within the required front yard setbacks and construction of a vehicular gate with reduced setbacks on property zone R110, located at 755 Blossom Hill Road, APN 523-04-043, fence height exception request or application FHE 21-003, property owner David and Nala. I might have read that wrong. Kohanchi and applicant Nina Guralnik. Project planner is Savannah Bennig. And I will see if I will ask if any commissioners need to be recused from this item. And may I see a show of hands from commissioners that have visited the subject property? Okay, very good. And so then I will turn it over to staff for their staff report.
Excellent. Good evening, planning commissioners. Before you is an appeal of a community development director decision to deny a fence height exception request at 755 Blossom Hill Road. This item was originally scheduled for the September 14th meeting date. On September 13th, the property owner requested the item be continued to the November 9th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. The staff report and exhibit materials from the September 14th meeting is what is being considered today. The property owner is requesting approval to permit a previously constructed 6-foot metal fence and gate. The fence is along the property line within the required front yard setback. Per current town code, fences are limited to 3 feet in height when located within a required front yard, and gates have an 18-foot setback requirement unless accepted is granted by the town engineer and the community development director. The fence also has sharp points as seen in Exhibit 12, which are prohibited per town code. On February 12th, 2021, the property owner applied for an exception to the town's fence regulations for the unpermitted construction of the gate and the fencing on the subject property, which does not comply with the town's code fence regulations. The property owner cited condition D for privacy and security concerns as justification for their fence and gate. The privacy concerns were related to the property's proximity to commercial centers and medical offices, citing occasions when people thought their home was the chiropractor's office, which is located next door. The property owner also cited protecting children, containing animals, and protecting a garden as justification for extra security. On July 2nd, 2021, the town denied the exception request because the findings listed in the town code could not be made. The decision of the Community Development Director to deny the fence height exception application was appealed on August 5th, 2022. The appellant listed security and the unique location as justification for their appeal. The appellant's letter raises several points to support their fence height exception, all of which is listed in your staff report. Of the 7 public comments received for this application, 1 was in opposition to the fence. Based on the discussion provided in the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission deny the appeal, upload the decision of the Community Development Director, and deny the fence height exception. This concludes staff presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your staff report. Do any commissioners have questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. This is a question for the town attorney. It seems to me in the applicant's or appellant's package, they were disputing this item because, I hope I've got the right item, because the fence build began before the ordinance, or I'm sorry, that they couldn't get a hold of town staff because of COVID. And so there was no clear direction given from staff, and the information that they could find online didn't provide clarification as to their specific circumstance. Can you comment on whether those reasons why this should be considered, the appeal should be considered? Could you comment on those and provide guidance, please?
Yes, so those contentions really fall into an estoppel argument, and the courts have held there's cases in which towns actually gave the wrong information to an applicant, and the court held that the applicant was still required to undo what had been constructed, because it was not possible to get estoppel against a public agency, because the courts will balance the public interest in having a consistent code applied against the private injustice. And the public interest in almost all cases will prevail in the court decision.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Janoff. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. First, I was wondering if you would just be able to, obviously I read it in the packet, but to say again, like the amount of attempts that the town made to reach out to them, and was it attempts where you just didn't hear back at all?
Yes, thank you for that question. So the town first sent a warning letter on December 14th, 2020. They applied for their exception on February 12th, 2021. We denied the application on July 2nd, 2021. And then the town continued to contact the property owner on November 16th, 2021, January 31st, 2022, March 22nd, April 5th, May 3rd, May 24th. And then we proceeded to send a second warning letter on July 7th, 2022.
Okay, thank you. And all of those attempts that were listed before the warning letter, you just didn't get any sort of response?
There were many instances where there was just no response at all. And if there was a response, it was very minimal.
Okay, thank you. And then Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Commissioner, I just wanted to add as well, we do generally reach out to try and have a conversation when we have a report of something that's non-conforming before issuing a violation. And there have been numerous conversations with them through the process. So it isn't a case where we just aren't getting a response. There are numerous conversations and following up to make sure that they are continuing and moving forward with what needs to be the next steps in the process, as they decided that they didn't want to remove the fence, and so they wanted to move on to the next steps.
Okay, thank you. And Chair, may I ask another question?
Yes.
I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more to the safety hazards for traffic and pedestrians that it causes. Like, one thing I saw was that it wouldn't allow for vehicles to clear the travel lanes while queuing, and I just don't really understand what that means, if you'd be able to speak a little bit to that.
I can jump in initially, Savannah, if you'd like, and we also have the town engineer, Woo-Jae Kim, available. It has to do with the location of the gate, not allowing a car to pull all the way onto the property while waiting for the gate to open, but would block the sidewalk and the travel lane is one of them. And the other issue, I believe, was the view triangle. As somebody is coming out of the driveway, does this fence and gate block that? But as I said, we do have Woo-Jae Kim here, town engineer, who may have something to add.
Thank you, Ms. Harber. Woo-Jae Kim, the town engineer. This request came through our office as well, and we reviewed the site. And Blossom Hill Road is an arterial for the town. So it's heavily used, 35 miles per hour speed limit. And the 18 feet requirement is so that the vehicle, when they're entering the property, that they wouldn't be blocking the street and they wouldn't be queuing waiting for the gate to open. So that's a safety concern there. Also, there's quite a bit of pedestrian and student traffic on the sidewalks. And that's the also other issue with the traffic view area, which needs to be cleared, or at least have like 3 foot high obstruction at most.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and Vice Chair Barnett.
Thank you. I have a question for staff in terms of the availability of the staff to answer questions from the public during the COVID shutdown.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I'll jump in again since Savannah has joined us since that time. We have continued to be available through the entire closure, even when we did not have open door drop-in hours. We did continue to respond to inquiries via phone and email.
Thank you for that response.
Okay. Did you have any other questions?
Yes, actually, I had a question for the town attorney, if I might.
Go ahead.
So I noticed in section 29.40.0320B that there are references to special privacy concerns and wildlife problems as potential reasons for exception from the fence regulations. And my question is, are these only relevant where the fence is outside of the setback?
So, yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. You still have your hand up, so I just want to make sure if you have other questions. Okay, Commissioner Thomas.
I have a question for staff also, just about the other houses on that block of Los Gatos Boulevard. I just wanted to confirm that because there are other fences on that block of Los Gatos Boulevard towards, going towards the school, I guess you could say. And I just wanted to confirm that all of those were in compliance with the ordinance. And if there were any that are not, it's because they were built before the ordinance was passed.
Yes, that is our understanding, that all of the other properties either are in conformance or the fence was built prior to the adoption of the most recent ordinance in 2019. I don't believe we're aware of any in that vicinity that are currently in non-compliance and built after the new ordinance.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to confirm because there were lots of different options and styles happening along there. Thank you.
Very good. Are there any other questions from commissioners? And you'll have another opportunity to ask staff questions after the public hearing is closed. Okay, I don't hear any. So then we will turn to the appellant. And the appellant has up to 5 minutes to speak to the Planning Commission on this item.
So if anyone would like to speak, there we go. We've got 2 hands raised, Elena, and I will let you go ahead and speak. You may speak for up to 5 minutes. If there's anyone else on your team who also wants to speak, let us know and we can allow them. It all needs to be part of the same 5 minutes.
Can you show the PowerPoint if possible? Before we
Yes.
start the time.
Yes.
Just because
will
I have
get
to be
that started.
expeditious. Thank you so much for coming. We truly appreciate it.
Hi, you guys look confused. I'm Alana. That's my husband, David. We're on my computer.
Hi, thanks so much. This is the fence exemption request for the Cohanche family. Next slide. Next slide, please. There are a lot of topics to cover, so I'll go as quickly as possible. Next slide. Okay, our home is positioned, as we discussed, in a commercial area. Directly in front of us are the terraces of Los Gatos. To the right, in the front is King's Court Shopping Center, and directly to the right, adjoined to our home, is a large dental chiropractor office. Next slide, please. This is the terraces of Los Gatos. Next slide. This is the King's Court. Next slide. And this to the right is adjoining our fence is the chiropractor dental office. Next slide. Again, concerns with this. I couldn't be more vocal about it. In the area, there's a lot of walking traffic. There are a lot of strangers. There's a lot of very suspicious characters. We feel that we need the added protection. In addition, the terraces, our home is directly under their second story. So there are probably within 100 people that can view into our kitchen and into our front lot. So we think that we need an added layer of protection from that as well. Next slide, please. Again, as discussed, we're on Blossom Hill Road, very dangerous street. The speeds have been unchecked for years. There's within recent years an accident where somebody was unfortunately killed. That was within a block of our home. Our home, the fence is a galvanized steel fence. It is almost impenetrable by a car, and we fear a car jumping the curb. And just like before, a car actually swerved off the road and hit someone who's opening their trunk, we feel that puts us at high risk. So we think it's a safety measure. Next slide, please. Things to consider: crime rates are going up everywhere. In particular, Blossom Manor, our home was actually burglarized within the last few years, very known to the city and to the street. 2 doors down, 763 was burglarized within the last year, which I think is important to note. Next slide, please. In general, we live in a great area, but unfortunately, it's not as safe as we think. Our city is more dangerous than 53% of cities. Please, next slide. If you look at the ring thread, which we have from our front door camera, there's a bunch of stuff that's going on in the city. I don't know if people are discussing it. Trespassing, this is all in Los Gatos. Gunshots, people with guns, people stealing packages. I think we need to reevaluate the safety of our community. Next slide, please. This is the same. Next slide, please. Something that was astounding to us when I looked at, we have a child, a 2-year-old at home. The southern part of Los Gatos might be protected from this, but where we live in the red dot, we're within a very close area to about 200 sex offenders, one within a few homes of us. So we think it's safe to have an extra fence, one in which the vehicular gate is only closed at nighttime to protect us from these incidents. Next slide, please. Again, Alana and I are both Jewish. I don't like to say this. Alana and I come from families, Russian and Persian, that left their home countries in exile. And we're quite concerned given the current rhetoric in the world. Just notable on this is that there was a manifesto with somebody who had guns ready to kill Jews in Los Gatos within the last year, 7/19/2021. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. In addition to that, some other considerations. I'm a single provider physician. I don't truthfully make enough money. We make good money, but I'm a single provider and we have active endeavors in the works. I'm buying a vending machine business that requires a lot of inventory that will stay in our home. I plan for an exotic car business on Turo that will start in the next year. And we have the original Silker farmland that has a lot of productive products that we're going to sell in the future. So I think those assets put this at higher risk than other properties. Next slide, please. Again, this was discussed when we went online. We moved to this town. My wife was pregnant. We were very stressed. It was a COVID pandemic. Nobody was accessible. Very, very difficult to get a hold of people. So we used the only resource available, Los Gatos, California.gov, which was unfruitful. Next slide. It basically said 6 feet, and that's all. 6 feet, no setback, period. Next slide. So if you look through Los Gatos, there are fences everywhere. And we looked everywhere. We looked, and this is within a 2-minute drive. We found 39 fences. We discussed it with the city. The comments that, these are before, etc., don't seem to apply given the ubiquitousness of the fences. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Again, you can't have selective reinforcement of the rules. We should have a way to monitor who has a fence and who doesn't for you to be able to say that previous fences existed. There are actually 1 to 2 on this street that violate and 1 that was built in the last few months. Next slide, please. I'm a single provider. My wife and I live here. We moved here to protect our daughter. We bought our home close to its peak. Property taxes are high. So at least our opinion should be as important as others. COVID happened. We're scared. Life is tough. Next slide. We understand the concerns I presented. A single person complained, and we don't think their concerns are valid. Please bring us to where we're here, and we're all just trying to survive and live happily. Thank you so much. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to ask if any planning commissioners have questions for the appellant. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. Where did you get the number that Los Gatos is more dangerous than 53% of cities?
Can you still hear me? Yeah.
Now we can.
Yeah. So there are a number of registries online. I can actually open it up. I initially had a reference. I can get it to you in about 30 seconds. That's a universally accepted number currently. The crime index is 47 out of 100, which indicates that it's 47% safe relative to other U.S. cities.
Okay, and so then a follow-up is just, it seems like you have a lot of concerns specifically about Los Gatos and crime here, and instead of doing all of this for your home, why did you move here, and why don't you move if this is such a big concern for you?
I'm a cardiac anesthesiologist at Good Samaritan Hospital. I have to be within 15 to 20 minutes for emergencies, very important ones. And there is a very selective distance that I can live that we felt safe. We want our daughter to be in a good school district, and this is one of the best. I'm not suggesting that. It's tough to say that I'm suggesting that this is a very dangerous area. Clearly, I didn't think so, given that we moved here. But given what we've heard in moving here and the dangers that it presents, our home was robbed within the last 3 years. Somebody jumped over a fence and came here and robbed the home. We weren't here, but that's the story that we're hearing from our neighbors. That's terrifying. 2 doors down, they were robbed. On Oleander, a car was stolen 2 blocks away within the last 6 months. Even though it's easy to look, right? Everybody during COVID and pre-COVID, we wanted to buy a home. That's the thing to do. You move to a city, you start working, you buy a home. One of the biggest concerns when you buy a home is where to live. Unfortunately, it was very hard to find homes, and this was the quickest to get. And we actually bought it off market, and we're very lucky. So I love the town. I just think we should be transparent about the safety concerns so that we can move forward safely as citizens. We can't take a blind eye to the dangers that exist, I feel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Do any other commissioners have questions for the appellant? Vice Chair Barnett.
I'm afraid I have a large number of questions, maybe 8 or 9. I wonder if the chair would indulge me as I go through them.
Please.
Well, so yes, go ahead and do that. And it looks like,
All right, I thought you were asking me.
yeah.
Yes, sir. What's your position on the town's argument that your fence spikes are in violation of the code?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the town has pointed out that you have spikes at the top of the fence in violation of section 2940-0315 of the code, and I was wondering what your position is on that.
So to be quite honest, the spikes were an intent of an aesthetic. We were trying for it to look nice. We didn't realize it was against the code when we looked at the rules. The ordinance that was listed was very clear, and that was all that was listed with regards to fence that was posted on that website. Though I understand the concern, and I understand that might be an issue, that for us is not that significant. If needed, I can get rid of the spikes on the fence.
Okay, thank you. And
I understand that concern.
Okay, appreciate that. Is the garage on your property available for parking, and if not, why?
The garage on the parking was converted to a closed space so that we can use it as storage. So no, it is not currently used and accessible as a car for cars.
Could the storage be removed to another location so that you could park the car there and have straight access out to Blossom Hill for your emergency calls?
Sorry, can you repeat that statement?
Yes, could the storage be removed elsewhere so that you could park your car in the garage and have straight access onto Blossom Hill for your emergency calls?
The garage is the front lot of our house is very large. It's really far back. So in theory, if you put a car in there, it can only fit one and not two. And that still wouldn't, I don't fully understand. Are you saying that parking in the garage would make it easier to get out for emergencies? Because it's very far away from the front of the house.
No, what I understand is that you want to keep the front area available for potential use by your daughter as a playing area. And therefore you don't want a car parked there. So my question is whether you could find that available parking, keep the play space open, and still have direct access out to the street.
In theory, yes, I could put my car, but currently we have 2 cars and a third because our mother-in-law is here all the time. And I plan on buying 2 to 3 more cars, exotic cars in the next 6 months to a year for the purpose of renting them out as a business. So even if I did that, it would be blocked for me to get out because those cars require space to be parked.
Okay, so if we can move on. The letters that you sent to the town don't actually have dates on them. I've looked at Exhibit 5 on page 27 and Exhibit 6 on page 31. Are you able to define what the sending dates of those 2 letters were?
I don't have those in front of me, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, and so my fellow commissioner raised the question about notices from the town. Is it accurate that you received a number of outreaches by the town concerning the fence and gate?
So the notices that were responded to us were after the fence was made, not previous to. There were several attempts to contact the town where we did not get responsiveness. And we made the fence given what we knew to be the knowledge at the time. In response to every single one that was sent, every single message that was sent that we received, we communicated again with the town to say that we believe that this should be appealed for X, Y, and Z. The delay in that time frame has nothing to do with our miscommunication. It has to do with we were waiting for the next steps to occur. Our mother-in-law met with the town several times. I met with the town at least once, and there have been several phone calls between then and now. The narrative that we were communicated with without responsiveness is false. We definitely responded to every message if it made sense for the next step to occur.
Okay, were some of those emails or was it all oral?
Mainly phone calls and in-person meetings. In fact, it's very easy for us to find out because Nina Goralnik met with the planning committee multiple times. Joel, Jocelyn, everybody who is well aware of her communication. I'm late to the game in communication because the last several years have been relatively tough for us. But in response to that, yes, we've definitely responded to the messages.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is in Exhibit 6, which is one of the letters submitted to the town. In paragraph 8, it says that the fence was placed solely for safety during the COVID pandemic. Was that correct at the time?
Not solely, but one of the major reasons, yes.
Okay. And would you acknowledge that there's a risk that the gate mechanism or the remote might not be operable at some times due to malfunction or batteries?
Is it possible? So are you asking me, is it possible that a mechanical vehicular gate can malfunction? Yes. In response to that, if I may, the gate is left open all days from 6:30 to 9 p.m. In the potential that would happen, it would happen off hours when the car traffic is significantly minimal on Blossom Hill Road. In which case we would park on the side of the road and we have side gates that would allow us into that gate.
Okay.
Right, I just want to clarify.
My wife likes to speak.
Yeah,
We're
he meant 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m., not evening hours, but as in the entire day from morning till night.
Yeah.
It's left open.
Yeah.
It's only closed at night for our safety.
Yeah. Never has it been closed during the day.
Therefore, it could never block anyone from driving in or pulling in that or
Yeah.
block the road. That just wouldn't happen because it's always open.
Yeah. That being said, also, we intentionally purchased the top line clicker and device that is over 500 feet away. We thought of that concern prior to placing it and planned ahead.
Okay, so clarify for me, if you would, how many occasions of trespass there have been during your period of ownership?
Twice. One person came into our backyard to obtain persimmons when we moved in. And when we moved in, there was a small amount of time between the time that we purchased the home and we moved in because we were delivering a baby. In that 2-week time, somebody squat in the front of our house. We had a squatter in the front of our home. Very nice couple that was sleeping on the front of the home. We asked them to leave. So in terms of how long we have lived here and how many people have trespassed on our watch, twice.
Okay, thank you for that. You pointed out in your appeal that there were a number of fences within the setback in Los Gatos Almaden Road, but did you find any on Blossom Hill Road between, say, Cherry Blossom and Camellia Terrace?
So within you're speaking a very small distance, right? So you're asking a question of 7 homes. You're asking, were there any within 7 homes, right? Because across the street is the retirement facility, and to the right of me is the dental chiropractor office. And the answer is yes. There's a vehicular gate at the end of the street.
Do you know if it's within the setback?
It is not within the setback. The reason I don't bring that up is because I don't feel that's appropriate to discuss my neighborhood.
Okay. So can you comment on the fact that you have security concerns, but at the same time, you're willing to keep the gate open during daylight hours?
I think the vast majority of trespassing that occurs in Los Gatos, if you look at the ring thread and historically, and you look at crime data, happens at night. So my concern is when I am not home. I am a happy gun owner. And if somebody comes into my house during the nighttime, I'm usually present. During the daytime, during the nighttime, sometimes when I leave the house, I'm not present. It was my concern. I'm worried about the time when I leave to go to call in the hospital in the middle of the night and I'm not home. So I'm not as concerned during the day.
Okay, and then finally, you acknowledged in your presentation today that, and I think in your appeal also, that Blossom Hill is in fact a dangerous road because of speeding.
Yes, sir.
And what do you, in light of that statement, what do you feel is incorrect about the town's position that there is a safety risk with respect to the gate not being 18 feet back and the fence being within the setback?
In response, okay, so I have to take a very step back to the view. If the true concern were that the gate and the vehicle setback was a risk, then everyone with a gate that's on a high speed street, Los Gatos, Almaden, as an example, should be at the same risk. In response to that, also, to the comment, would be that the fence to us, right? Because both the incidents where the person was killed, and there's another incident I know of in the same town on Blossom Hill Road, where a car ran into somebody's home. It drove into somebody's home within the last 5 years, I believe. We don't want that to happen. Our fence would prevent a car from getting into our lot. So that's one of the main reasons why we put up that metal fence.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all my questions. Appreciate your
Thank you so
time.
much.
Thank you for all your questions, Vice Chair Barnett. And then we also have Commissioner Thomas has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just have two questions for the applicant. The first is if you could walk us through how and when you tried to contact the town to get clarification on the fence ordinance.
The vast majority of communication prior to the inception, the placement of the fence was done by Nina Gorolnik. When we purchased the house, it was October of 2020. I was sick. I had COVID. We were managing complications of COVID. My wife was pregnant. We were living on Santana Row. She had a very complicated pregnancy. She was in the hospital probably 8 times over the course of a month with concerns that there would be fetal demise. The baby was small. We had IUGR, intrauterine growth restriction. And in the time from when we were in the hospital and delivering the baby, within several weeks, Nina definitely contacted the planning department at least 4 separate times, because I know, because she was in the hospital when she did it. I personally did not call within that time frame. I spoke to the contractor. We hired a contractor who looked at the online ordinance that was listed, and I approved given the ordinance that was listed. I myself did not attempt to contact the planning department.
Okay, so thank you for that. So the contractor that you hired said that they looked at the ordinance and you went with them, that they trusted it, or were
No, we confirmed by looking up the ordinance as well.
So you do not think that the way that the ordinance was written, that it's clear that the way that you built your fence, that it's in violation?
So the ordinance that we used is the one that I put in the PowerPoint. The ordinance that we use, we actually followed to a T. So there was an ordinance listed online, and that ordinance, I can pull it up. 1 second, let me get the ordinance up. That ordinance essentially says in residential zones, fences, hedges, and walls not over 6 feet high are allowed on or within all property lines. Period. There's no addendum to it. There's no setback discussion. There's no 3 foot. This was modified after the fact. So this was listed on the website in October of 2020. The ordinance handbook, which is what we were told after the fact is different, was updated within the last few years. And unfortunately, the online website was not updated. And I understood the lawyer's argument that I heard it. It was a very intricate and phenomenal argument that, you know, the public, etc. But this was what was written and this is what we used. So it's not that I violated an ordinance and I had any nefarious agenda. That was what was posted. And I get it, it's been COVID, life is tough, and we didn't update anything. But I just used what was there. I don't know how else to answer that, to be honest with you. So no, I did not know that I violated the ordinance, because the one that I utilized was I correctly followed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Janoff.
Yeah, just quickly, because I know we have public comment and then the appellant does have the opportunity to speak again. But I did want to just follow up on the question Commissioner Thomas is asking of staff. Staff, can you verify that at the time the appellant looked at the ordinance, that in fact was the ordinance and the only thing listed was what he's describing, or were there other sections of code that the appellant simply missed or didn't know to find or didn't search thoroughly enough? I'm having a hard time understanding how the content of what is publicly available online, which is generally all anybody is going to have access to during COVID anyway, how that could be so different from what the actual code at the time was. If staff could please explain.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd be happy to give a little bit of a background on that. The official town code that is available online, that's chapter 29, which is the zoning code, but all of the other chapters of the municipal code. The way when code updates are adopted by town council, those updates actually get automatically updated by the company that maintains that website in our code. However, there are sometimes other pages on the town's website with reference information pulling out certain sections of the code to try and make it more easily accessible. And I believe the page that the applicant and appellant are referencing was a reference that was connected with the building department's webpage, stating when a building permit would be required for a fence, and it had reference to the old code at that time. And so that was delayed in being updated. The full municipal code was updated promptly.
So you're saying that there were two places where the town, there were two code references, one up to date, one not up to date. So up to date code was available at the time the appellant was searching for fence information.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Restby.
Thank you, Chair. I actually had the same question as Commissioner Janoff, so thank you for asking that and for your answer, staff. I did have one other question for the applicant appellant, because I just don't find it readily in my packet. What was the date of construction of the fence? I don't know that our materials contain that.
The date of construction of the fence is the end of 2020.
So
I believe somewhere we were delivering a child. So somewhere early December of 2020, like December 7th, I would say December 6th, somewhere around the line.
okay, because I noticed that the town issued its administrative warning on December 14th. So it would have to be
it must
before
be
that. But do you know how much? What was the time lapse between the time you completed the fence and the time you got the warning?
Probably several weeks, 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, that's my best guesstimate, to be honest with you.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a lot of questions, and thank you for all your thorough questions, commissioners. I feel like we should go ahead and turn to the public for public comments. So I will put out to those in attendance. This would be the time for anyone that would like to speak in verbal communications on this item. So if you'd like to do so, please raise your hand on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair.
follow-
We do have several people who have their hands raised. Right now, the first is Mark. I will allow you to speak. Mark, you should be able to unmute and you have up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, hi. My name is Mark Jameson. I live at 285 Marchmont Drive. I'm in acquaintance with the Cohanchis. I'm just basically in support of the fence. I drive by their house every morning. I find nothing offensive with the fence. The gate is open during the day that I notice. The only safety issue I would potentially realize is if like an Amazon truck or something like that had a delivery, and during the day it's open for delivery. So I don't see anything that would block the driveway. we've had someone woken up to my daughter going into our garage and finding a stranger asleep in our garage. And if I had the same opportunity to build a security fence, if my property afforded that, I would. I know what, through reading all the next door and comments that have been going on in town, and I had a young baby and wife at home during the day, I would definitely have a fence, a security fence at night. And maybe there is some compromise that could happen, taking the spikes down, leaving the gate open during the day. So I would just like to see maybe the town could work with the Comanches as far as keeping the gate, maybe painting it, that it might blend in a little bit more with the surrounding area. But I see many gates similar to theirs, and I realize it's not fully to code, but think there might be some room for exception. The fact that they live on probably one of the most busiest places in town. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. And I will turn to the commission and see if any commissioners have questions for you, Mr. Jamison. I don't see any hands raised, but thank you again for your comments. And looks like we do have others that would like to speak on this item.
Yes, and Steve is next in line. We'll allow you to speak. You should be able to unmute, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. Steve Mendoza here. I live at 16536 Inglewood Avenue, and I frequently drive by the property in question. I go to Pete's quite a bit, and honestly, I find the fence well constructed and immaculate, and I've really never had any problem with it. It seems to fit in the neighborhood as far as I can see on my daily trips to King's Court. I agree that perhaps maybe there's a compromise here that between the town and the Comanches. You know, he has a young child, and security these days is a concern I also have. So I just think the fence fits into the neighborhood, and I think that the security provides his family is important, and I support the presence of the fence. That's all I really have to say.
Thank you for your comments. And I'd like to see if any commissioners have questions for you. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Thank you again. And it looks like we have others as well.
Yes, next in line is John. You should be able to unmute, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Yes. Thank you. My name is John Seller. I'm a 31-year resident of Los Gatos, and going back further, I actually went to high school here, so I have deep roots in the community. And appreciate your time and your consideration of this matter. I have a couple of points that I would like to make. One is I understand and respect the need for rules and regulations around building issues such as Dr. Comanches. I absolutely think that they create an orderly and aesthetic community. But if we're going to have these ordinances, they either need to be applied uniformly or they should not be applied at all. To single one person out, while there are many examples of others that have in fact violated this code, I think is blatantly unfair, unethical, and not in the spirit of community. The other point that I would like to make is prior to I live on Littlefield Lane. Prior to that, I lived at the corner of Camino del Cerro and Blossom Hill Road. I was not on Blossom Hill Road, but we cornered it. And it's a very busy road. People would drive very rapidly down the road. And in fact, there were on 2 instances, not while we owned the home, but 2 instances, cars came through the fence onto our property. So The issue of safety is one that is very near and dear to me. Blossom Hill is a very busy road. Dr. Conchi is surrounded by commercial buildings. It's not the typical, I live on a cul-de-sac now. I don't have those kind of concerns. But if I were to live on Blossom Hill Road, and I have to tell you, part of the reason that we left that our previous home is because of issues around safety with cars coming rapidly down the street. So I think that it's really important to consider the safety aspect of cars jumping the road and potentially going through the fence, causing harm to family and or the structure. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. It looks like there is a couple of questions for you from commissioners. I'll start with Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Seller. I just wanted to point out one thing. I appreciate your concern for the Comanche, and I appreciate your thinking that this is an isolated incident, that we would be seeing the fence issue for this one family differently from others. But I wanted to point out and perhaps direct you to previous planning commission meetings. We've had a number of fence ordinance issues along these very lines. We are not singling out one family. And I just wanted to make sure that you understood, we do hear these issues individually. We consider them on their merits. And I just wanted to assure you, this is not an isolated, singled out instance. Just wanted to make that perfectly clear.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Okay.
I was going to say, I appreciate that. We all know there are multiple examples of fences that are 6 feet, that are within the 18-foot setback.
Yes,
maybe each one of them has been.
We are aware of that, Mr. Seller, and many of them are prior to the fence ordinance being in place, and some are not, and they come to us individually. But thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Okay. And then also Commissioner Thomas has a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Seller, I was wondering if you were aware of any recent fence height exceptions that you felt like have been unfair, because you mentioned this, that you feel like not enforcing it uniformly is a problem. So are you positive that the fences you're thinking of and referring to have been built since the new ordinance was adopted?
No, I'm not positive of that. But like I said, I've been in this community for a lot of years. I work in this community and I drive through the streets and, can I prove that? No, absolutely not. But it is very much my sense that there have been continued construction of 6-foot fences over the years. And my sense is that some were put in prior to the ordinance, and my sense is that some have been put in subsequent to the ordinance.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that it is important. I think that our town staff works really hard to ensure that things are enforced uniformly across the board. And I know that this has been something that has come up in previous meetings, and every single time we ask, can you tell us exactly how many 6-foot fences that are in violation that have been built since the ordinance? And as far as my experience since being on the planning commission, we haven't had one issue with it. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Commissioner Thomas. And do any other commissioners have questions for the speaker, Mr. Seller? I don't see any hands raised, so thank you for your comments. And it looks like we still have others that want to speak.
Yes, I believe the next speaker is Tony. I'm going to allow you to speak. Go ahead. You can unmute. You have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name's Tony Bomarito. I'm well acquainted with the Cohanchis. I was just listening to the entire discussion. I just wanted to make the point, and I hope it's accurate, but it sounds like and they did what I would expect any reasonable person to do, which is to consult the town's website. And it sounds like any reasonable person in their circumstances would have concluded that they were acting within the code. Now, I guess they could have scoured, further and found more information through other accessible sites, but I can easily see how I myself would have been directed toward the information that they had and thought, yeah, I'm acting within the code properly. So it seems like it would be, I think in fairness to them, this is sort of a similar circumstance where somebody might have built a fence 20 years ago or whatever, and then later on after the fact, they find out that the code is in fact different than what they were told. And I don't think that's any fault of theirs. So I think in fairness to them, I could see how they, could be treated like somebody who built their fence before the code was changed.
Okay, thank you for that.
That's my comment.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Do any commissioners have questions for Tony? I don't see any, but thank you for your comments. I don't see any other hands raised, but if there are anyone else that's viewing the meeting that would like to speak on this item, it looks like we have a couple more.
Yes, Lee, you should be able to speak. You have up to 3 minutes.
Okay, I don't think I'll take the 3 minutes, but I would like to comment that one of the reasons that that fence ordinance was changed as to the setbacks in the front and the sides of yards that fronted streets was to maintain the small town character of Los Gatos. And when I drove by this morning after reading it on the website, after just coming back from vacation in Oregon, I was sort of shocked by that fence. And I felt like, wow, if everybody who wanted to be more protected put up fences like that, it would definitely change the character of Los Gatos. As far as safety goes, I live in a house that's on a corner of a street where there's a curve going uphill. And before I moved in, the actual bay window of our house on the street was hit by a car. The tree in front of our house was hit by a car. My car was demolished by a speeder coming up the hill. And yet I don't have that kind of a fence, and I would never put it up because I think it would be an affront to my neighbors. And I guess that's all I have to say. I mean, I understand to a certain extent their concern, but there must have been another way to do that. They could have replaced their 6-foot fence that is further in with a more substantial fence. I also would like to comment on the fact that the whole front of that lot is fronted by very large trees that, again, are not consistent with our current code, but they were there. And their concern is about intruders. And it seems to me having those large trees along that area provides a sort of hiding place for people. And they would, if they're concerned about safety, one thing would be to lower the foliage in the front of their yard. And I also looked at the plans and I was confused because it looked like there was a lot of space inside the yard, inside the existing fence that has a gate across it that would allow for the more storage of cars. It just shows on the plan, asphalt. And I guess that's all I have to say. I do have a certain amount of sympathy for them, but I also think that the town needs to be very careful about the exceptions that it grants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Quintana. Do any commissioners have questions for Ms. Quintana? I don't see any hands raised, but thank you again for your comments. And it looks like we have another speaker, Mr. Freeman.
Yes, Keith, you should be able to unmute. You have up to 3 minutes. Keith Freeman, you are still muted. If you could unmute,
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
go ahead.
Thank you. I live at 759 Blossom Hill Road, next door to the Cohanches, and have lived here for 30 years. And over the years, have seen quite a few incidents on the street. And all the comments have already been made about it being a commercial area. I'd like to also point out that the land slopes downward where 755 is located. And without that fence, they were quite exposed to everything that's been mentioned, people walking by, accidents. There's been burglaries in there while we've lived next door. There's been burglaries next door to me at 763, that the Cohanches would want to put up this fence in this particular area seems to make sense to me, and I don't have any objections to it. I don't have any aesthetic problems with it because it's in such a commercial area, especially with the terraces located across the street. It isn't really out of character considering where it's located. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Freeman. Do any commissioners have questions? I don't see any hands raised, so thank you again. And I will again say that I don't see anyone else with their hands raised. So this would be the time to raise your hand if you want to speak on this item before I close the public hearing.
So if anyone else wishes to speak before we do return to the applicant appellant for their closing statement, any members of the public who wish to speak should raise your hand now. I don't see any additional hands raised, Chair.
Thank you for that. So as staff said, that would be the end of public comments. And now we will go back to the applicant appellant. And you have an additional 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission, as well as any comments that were made by the public.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. I'm gonna respond to a few of the comments that were made negatively toward the fence, and then I'll just make it brief. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. We're neighbors at the end of the day, so I hope it stays that way regardless. One, in relation to the comment about maintaining a small town values, we are again in a business area. We fit into where we are, and that respectfully doesn't make sense when the ubiquitousness of the violations is so severe. There are hundreds to thousands. I spoke with Joel within the past day. There are thousands of violations. When it's that big of a portion, it no longer makes sense to say that's the value of the town. Unless we were to accept the 12,000 to 20,000, whatever properties you want to build in the next decade, that doesn't make sense to me. I understand your point. I respect the comment, but I disagree. With regards to packaging, packages, if the gate were closed. Again, the gate is open from the hours, sometimes earlier, of 6:30 to 9-10 p.m. at night. I can make it, if you want to, we can have some kind of system where I monitor that, video record it. We can do that. Whatever you say, I will abide by. But in response to the packages on Blossom Hill Road and nowhere else on this street, on anywhere else in this area, Amazon trucks don't drive into the driveway. They just don't. They drive, they stop in front of the driveway, they take out the package, they walk it to your front door. In addition, if let's say our gate was closed, we have a metal package and delivery system outside of the gate that's embedded in the gate itself for this very purpose. So the potential for a delivery truck stopping and staying for longer than any other home does not exist in our home. In response to there was a comment about somebody who said that, you know, even though her house was, a car flew into her house and, you know, she didn't have a fence, so why does anybody else have a fence? Do we believe that to be a justifiable comment? Do we think that somebody saying that just because my house was robbed, my house had a car that crashed into it, why didn't I have a fence? Does that merit you after the fact saying that why does somebody else want to prevent these disasters? That does not make sense to me as a logical statement. In response to the trees that we have, there's a comment about visibility. So one of the big comments is there's walking traffic, there's people coming by, you can't see when you come out of the fence. This gate was designed as a metal perforated fence with the intent of being able to see through the fence. That was deliberate. In addition, the trees alone block the view enough, and they're grandfathered in because they were placed a decade ago. So none of those arguments seem to be valid with response. Yes, in theory, that is a great argument. But when you look at the fine details of what is actually happening, it does not make sense. Our gate, if closed, which never is, has a package delivery system, so cars will not stop. The trees are there and they obstruct already. So even if I were to remove the gate, the trees are there. So I don't think the vast majority of comments that were made, though I do respect them, were valid in their points to get across.
Okay, and I think Ms. Armour had her hand up, so I bet I'm sensing that it probably was the 3 minutes. Is that
Thank you
correct?
so much. Sorry for
Okay.
so much time.
Okay. Well, you don't go yet, just yet. Let me see if commissioners have any additional questions for you. And this would be the last time to ask the applicant appellant any questions, because after this, we'll be closing the public hearing. Commissioner Jana.
Thank you. Mr. Kohani, you have a fence within this fence. Could you please describe that and tell us why that fence is not sufficient security for your needs?
That fence was locked when we came into the home initially. That fence was locked, and we had what's the word for people staying in front?
Squatters.
Oh, sorry. We had squatters in the home with that fence already. We also hired somebody to fix a door. Within the first 3 months that we were here, the front door was broken to the home. There was like a lock issue, and we left. He left for lunch and came back and got over that fence. So the way that the fence is designed, given the slope of the lot, it's a very flimsy wooden fence. In theory, for someone to say, why didn't you replace that fence? Then there's a can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, sorry. There's a misunderstanding of the cost incurred. To replace that fence entirely would have cost 3 to 5 times the cost of putting our fence in. So that's why we didn't. I would have replaced and fixed that fence, but the cost was too great to do so. So, yeah.
So there's a cost issue, and so you're saying that the fence inside the metal fence is not a sufficient fence. So another question, if I might, Chair. Your recent presentation indicated that you've got 2 new businesses that require use of your property in a way that would not that makes parking your cars, your personal use cars, necessary to park them outside the original fence and behind the new fence. So it seems it's a little unclear to me. Your arguments have gone quite a bit into personal security, but what it looks like to me is that you're really creating security for the cars that you want parked inside that fence as well. It seems like that's a pretty high priority. And also you're starting a high-end car rental business of some sort. And my guess is that you're going to want to park those cars behind this fence as well, because there obviously wouldn't be room behind the wooden fence, since there already isn't room behind the wooden fence for your cars.
I would, no, I think I could sufficiently fit more cars. But I did not prioritize one versus the other. All of them I feel are arguments that stand. I think the notion that safety is a priority to us has been made very clear. The notion that if I buy cars that are worth a lot, would I park them inside the inner gate versus in the other gate? The space and availability and protective measures, the outer gate is significantly more sufficient in protecting the cars. And so for the added space, I would park it in either. There's also the potential that if I were to rent those cars, that I would want those cars in the in-between space. And this is not a priority issue. I would want those cars in the in-between space so that a person, if they came to access the car, would also not have, there would also be an extra layer of barrier between the car and coming into our home.
So what I'm trying to understand is, given the use of your property in these new business ventures, whether or not you have sufficient room behind the wooden fence to store the vending machines and high-end cars as well as your cars, or whether they.
Yeah, likely not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I have one follow-up question, and that is, in order for us to, grant an exception, we have to make these required findings. And so I'm just wondering, one of them includes an undue hardship. So can you tell me the status of your two business ventures at this moment?
Yes. Can you hear me? Sorry. One of the business ventures, I'm in a bidding war to purchase a vending machine route that has 55 vending machines, 14 of which are unallocated that would stay in our home until I find a location for them. And I would store significant inventory in the house. So likely it will go through within the next 2 weeks. And I'll probably start taking over that business within the next month to 2. As far as cars, the car market, I looked within the last 2 years, I've been looking for cars. I went to Los Gatos exotic car collection many times. Unfortunately, the price of cars right now is 10 to 20% to 30%, even higher for exotic cars, higher. So I've been waiting for the price of the used car market to decline significantly for it to make sense. And yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I do just have a question. In the materials you submitted and what you discussed earlier, you stated that over 100 people you estimate from the terraces can see directly into your house. And so are you arguing that you feel like there's a safety concern because of the people that live at the terraces can see your house?
I think uninvited visibility of any place creates the potential for a person to have malintent. Any unwelcome visibility creates the scenario of, is the word voyeur? Voyeur. Creates the scenario of essentially someone that you not knowing having some intent upon you that you're unaware of. So do I think that a retirement facility is the most risky of them all? No, but the facility in and of itself has a lot of outsiders that come and work in the facility that have no association with Los Gatos. There's heavy turnaround there with both cooking staff, cleaning staff, the day-to-day workers and nursing staff that have changed in and out. My concern isn't necessarily for the residents that are living there and retired there and living happily. My concern is for everybody else. Right across from us, actually, directly across on the bottom floor, which has a large gate itself, is like, I think, a restaurant related to the retirement facility where all of the workers sit directly outside of our home and smoke constantly from early hours when I leave the home till 11 p.m. Right now, if I go outside, there's likely somebody smoking there. That in and of itself creates a level of stress and a level of fear with the stranger that's there, because there's very little accountability when it comes to
Okay, you answered my question. I just would like to clarify. So you're not really concerned about the residents that live across the street, but you are concerned about the type of workers that might come and be working at the terraces?
Everybody else that frequents that site, yes.
Okay. And Chair, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
So, one of the other things with the exceptions is that, there's security concerns that exist that cannot be practically addressed through alternatives. And I think Commissioner Janoff talked about this a little bit with the second fence, but can you walk us through any other improvements that you've made to your home or anything else that you've done to improve and increase the safety of your home for your family?
So the front gate that was the front door that was broken when we moved in, we fixed.
Okay.
The back door we reinforced with a double lock. We created a security system with about 17 cameras in the home.
Okay.
We 2 outside in the front, 3 outside in the back, a Ring doorbell. Everything that we can do that seems feasible, we've done.
Are those all the things that you've done? Is there anything else that you've done to try and
improve safety? I don't know. I don't see any other thing that you could do.
Okay.
Respectfully.
Okay. And do you have a pool?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a fence around your pool?
There is a reinforced cover that we essentially just reinforced within the last 2 months because our baby started to walk and we're worried that she's at risk. So yes, there's a cover to the pool.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I had a question for you. I was going to ask about the security system. I'm trying to understand, maybe you could help me understand. You're leaving the gate open from, if I heard correctly, 6:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. So relative to this issue with the terraces, I'm having a hard time like visualizing where the concern would be from 9 o'clock at night until 6:30 in the morning from the terraces. So could you help me with that? Because you're leaving the gate open the rest of the time.
So the concern is, I'm confused by the question. So you're saying how is
well,
it?
You're talking about being concerned about your safety,
Yeah, so saying, why would I
you
leave
gave the example of the workers at the terraces and people sitting outside. And so are these workers sitting outside from 9 at night until 6:30 in the morning?
So there are risks that I can control and risks that I can't control. So the comment of we feel that we also are in agreement from the beginning that this gate should not be closed during the day. So we feel that there is a potential that if my wife wants to come in and out, that there could be an issue. So we decided from the very inception that the gate would be open during those hours. For our own sake, for the sake of just us, we thought that it was appropriate for the gates to be open during the day. Now, I don't fully understand because the gate is perforated. So my concern is not necessarily that at daytime somebody's going to come in and at nighttime they're not. My concern is that the very added layer of protection is a strong deterrent to anybody that would create a problem. So, and again, crime significantly across the board is significantly worse at night, specifically with regards to trespassing and strangers breaking into homes. So, yeah, the gate, I mean, if there was an option to close the gate during the day and we thought it made sense, then yes, but I think logically speaking, we keep it open. And there's just an amount of risk that there are things that you can and make sense to do and things that you can't. I don't walk around, in a bulletproof vest, right? When COVID happened, we could have all.
It's okay. I think you answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Do any commissioners have any other commissioners have questions? Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes, Doctor, I'm having trouble understanding why you wouldn't get adequate security if you moved the fence back to the setback as required by the ordinance. I mean, wouldn't you get everything you're asking for by moving it into compliance with the ordinance?
Respectfully, if we moved cars, so multiple responses. If we moved cars closer to the front because we needed the space, those cars would be at risk for any people jumping over the curb and hitting those cars and vandalizing the cars, as the business discussion we had. And if we move the gate, it would incur significant costs. significant costs that are insurmountable. So even the notion, even if that was possible, even if we said we're going to move the gate, then by that virtue, we followed an ordinance, then would be surmisable that other people that were within similar situations should do the same. Right? The reason that we're asking, we changed the code and we said, it's really important for the town to maintain small town values, right? And we're saying that the reason that we can't ask everybody else, and the reason we made everyone grandfathered in is because it's a burden to its citizens, right? Because the notion of removing or reinstalling a fence is months of income, 6 months to a year of work, and a lifetime of money. I don't know, I get the suggestion, but in practicality, I think it's very, very, very difficult and non-feasible.
Okay, I understand your response. So continuing the conversation on that point, would it be safe to say, and other than the cost factor, which I respect is significant, the risk would be to the cars parked in front of it?
Well, also us, right? In between, this is our lot of our home. So in theory, if we're walking, it's our property. In theory, if I'm walking out to get my mail, a car could hop the curb and hit me. Same thing with our daughter. So it's a big lot. There's an 18 feet distance, right? If we're saying 18-foot setback from where the other fence is, there's 18 feet, and on both sides, probably 50, 60 feet. You're talking a big portion of our lot would be exposed. It's not like every other home. Our lot is set back 40 feet from the front of the street. So you're taking away a significant portion of our property.
Okay, I understand your point and appreciate your input.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And Commissioner Thomas has another question.
Thank you, Chair. I just have another question because you mentioned that it would, that you're going to start this business venture with the cars, but you currently don't own any of those vehicles and you're not storing any of them on your property?
I mean, my car is very expensive, but no, other than my own personal car that I use, no.
Okay. And then have you filed for like a business license for this business or anything yet that you're planning on doing?
I have a business license. I am myself. I don't think this should be privy to the city, but yes, I have a business license that could be utilized.
Okay.
For the public.
Okay, because, well, it is part of our undue, like seeing if this is undue hardship or something. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, understood. It could be amended. I have a corporation that could be amended easily to be utilized for this. So yes, the infrastructure is in place for me to start the business.
Okay. But it would be very expensive to move the fence back. So that's the main issue here.
That's one of the issues. That's the one that I think makes it almost impossible to do. It's not the main issue. I think there are many, but that's one of the issues that I think are very important.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other commissioners have questions for the applicant appellant? I don't see any other hands raised. So thank you for your responses, and I'm going to close the public hearing and turn to the commission for any additional questions for staff, comments on the application, appeal, or I don't know that we're ready for a motion yet, but maybe. And I will start with Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. Yeah, I have several comments that I want to share. I think that a lot of what he said ended up countering his other points. And so I just kind of want to go through my thoughts that I had as this was happening. But, what we have is a fence that's prohibited no matter what, because it has spikes within the setback. And then another fence in that fence that's also within the setback. And there's a 3 feet height limitation when it's in the front setback, traffic view area, and driveway view area. And this property meets all 3 of those criteria for why it should have a 3 feet height. And so I think that's a very important base to start with. Like there's a lot of reasoning behind them not being able to do this. And So one concern I had was they talked about how it will increase safety because the fence is pretty much impenetrable by cars. And where my mind went with this is that then if a pedestrian's walking along and a car comes or something, they'd have absolutely nowhere to go. And I'm a lot more concerned about a pedestrian than about some expensive cars inside of a fence. And so I think that it sacrifices the safety of the public for the potential safety of like some cars and supposedly his family, even though I think that there are other ways around this. And he said that he didn't replace the existing fence because of the cost, but that really confuses me because he's talking about expensive cars and having all of these business ventures and saying that that makes it nearly impossible. But I think that it's definitely within the realm of possibility for them to create a fence within their setback. And I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be required to do that. And, he said he wants 2 fences so that people can go through the first one to get the cars and then maybe not get past the second, which I also think contradicts some of the other points. So yeah, overall, I think that this feels like a very, very special exception that they're asking for that I don't think is warranted. I think, this fence really doesn't fit with town character. I was definitely surprised to see it. And I am not personally open to some form of compromise where they keep the fence open during the day and then close it at night, because first, there's not a way to enforce that. And I don't think that we can just put that as a condition, but also I don't think that that's the only problem by any means.
Thank you so much for your comments, Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I also just want to add that it's difficult for me to see this as a special security concern that exists that cannot be practically addressed through alternatives. And I know that we've talked about security and safety and how that can be problematic because some of it is like a feeling and perception. But that is just difficult. It is very difficult for me to grant an exception, like to grant this appeal as an exception based on possible future business ventures. And so I'm interested to hear what other commissioners have to say. I also think that I know that during COVID, things were difficult, but it's also difficult for me to think that the town didn't respond at all. Like there's just the lack of like proof of communication on either way is just really unfortunate for me, like, because it's making it difficult for me to know just based on multiple phone calls. And I think that as a person that has recently dealt like with things digitally when offices haven't been open, getting some permits for stuff, I definitely have proof of when I contacted the town first about things to clarify stuff. And so it just makes it hard for me to believe, since our email addresses are all over, that there wasn't a possible way to get a phone call back or email. So that's something that I'm kind of struggling with too.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Raspy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll join in my fellow commissioners. It seems to me that, and I think it's fairly plain, that the fence as currently constructed is violative of various aspects of our new town ordinance, both height, setback, materials. And I also didn't find many of applicants' arguments compelling. The reliance upon the crime statistics, for instance, I know certainly we've all faced those types of things, but I don't think my experience in Los Gatos, and I think most people, it's not such a crime infested area that 6-foot spiked fences are required for our protection. And all that being said, I think the only point that caught me at all was the notion of the confusion during COVID regarding what the town code actually provided. And so I listened to both sides of the argument on that issue. And I agree there may have been some confusion or lack of clarity perhaps, but applicants made clear this was an expensive build. And so I think reasonable due diligence was imperative on that part. I'm not sure they satisfied that requirement. It sounds like the town was available in large measure to answer reasonable queries. And so that could have been sorted out before. And so even that, I think defense fails in the long run. And so that's the way I see it.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Raspy. Back to Commissioner Thomas. You're on mute.
Thank you. I do have a question for staff, if that's okay.
It is.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about if cars were being stored in between the fences, is that can they be stored there permanently? Or is that one of those, like, I know that we have rules about things like RVs and boat trailers, and it's not supposed to be visible to the street. So I didn't really think about that until now. So I didn't have time to look up that part of our code, but could staff clarify that?
Yes, thank you for that question. I can address that in terms of our home occupation permit, which corresponds to receiving a business license. In this case, there are restrictions for having commercial vehicles or also storage that is visible from the street.
So it is allowed, or it would be part of the application would it be part of the application process, or it's not allowed?
So review of the description of the business would be part of the process. So when an applicant comes in for a business license that is associated with a residential address, we do look to get details of the business, whether they're going to be storing materials or have unusual activity that is out of character with the residential neighborhood. And so that's part of a home occupancy permit that would be required if they were to apply for a business license. Looks like Director Paulson has turned on his camera, so he may have something else to add as well.
Thank you, Ms. Armour. So Commissioner Thomas, I think you're recalling the RVs, boats, campers, trailers. Those are not allowed to be stored in the front setback, but a vehicle, you can park a vehicle as long as it's not your required parking, which is not the instance here. The other component that Ms. Van Aken and Ms. Armour were talking about is more related to the potential for any future business endeavors. So we would evaluate those at that time.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I didn't know if it had to do with the type of thing that was parked or if it was how long it was parked or both. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you for that. Commissioner Jana.
Thank you. So the only area that I could think would warrant an exception would be for a special circumstance where you've got some undue situation that required this fence. And at the moment, the only circumstance that the appellant has described that I heard tonight was a future potential high-end car rental business and that's all we heard. They're too expensive to purchase now. I get that. And so that business hasn't launched. But the Planning Commission can't make decisions based on a potential future what if. You know, somebody could say, well, I'm planning to have a dinosaur in my front yard and I need to protect that dinosaur statue. And I need a fence to protect it from vandals. Well, we can't really make a decision based on the what if. We need to make a decision based on the existing circumstances. And I think what we have heard tonight, and I think what I'm hearing my fellow commissioners saying, is that we have clear violations of an ordinance, and there aren't compelling reasons to make a finding for an exception. So, you know, and I can't make an exception based on a what if scenario. It might never materialize, and there we are. Having said that, I'm sympathetic to this property being in a quasi-commercial zone. It could, you know, if there were a car business, if there were an active car rental business, I could see potentially having this sort of a fence there to protect the vehicles behind it. It's not an affront to me to see this fence in this particular area of town, but I just can't find I can't find a compelling reason to make an exception, but I'm open to other commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Janoff. Vice Chair Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. One thing that troubles me a lot is the discrepancy between the code provision and what was on the website. But the fact is that the actual language of the ordinance was always in place and easily viewed. Also, I think it's quite important that we take advice from our town attorney that there is no estoppel under the general rules applicable to towns and cities. I'm concerned about the spikes, but appreciate the offer of the applicant appellant to remove those. It seems to me that there is adequate parking. There was a major part of the presentation in support of the appeal was that there wouldn't be an adequate play area for the children based on the parking requirement of the doctor. However, we did discuss the garage, and that seemed to be a partial solution to the problem. I don't think it's consistent with the Blossom Hill neighborhood. There are no other homes on that stretch between Camellia Terrace and Cherry Blossom that don't have the proper setbacks. Let's see, I had some other thoughts here. Oh, in terms of the safety, which was raised as a concern by the town, I didn't see that there was, I assume that there was a concern given opportunity to understand the spacing of the pickets on the fence and the view that would be allowed by that. It appears that the town, for whatever reason, discounted that as a problem. So in all, I tend to agree with my fellow commissioners that there's a problem with this. I'm very sympathetic to the applicant having relied on the incorrect information on the website and spent a lot of money doing that. But I don't see that we have an opportunity to go outside our jurisdiction and allow it in this case. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair Burnett. I have a few comments as well. I was on the Planning Commission when we were considering the updates to the fence ordinance. And I think the whole idea was very much in line with what Ms. Quintana said in her comments, which is that, you know, if we're going to have this small town character, we can't go into a situation where we're going to have all these homes that are going to put big fences along the front of their property. That doesn't, you know, jive with it being a welcoming community. So having said that, the ordinance is law, and it became law. And I was a bit concerned to hear that there's the possibility of one kind of information in one place and one in another place. But nonetheless, the fence ordinance had been in place. And I also had the experience of having been on the commission when we were working on the general plan during the pandemic. And I don't see any scenario where town staff wouldn't have been very and incredibly responsive during that entire ordeal of the pandemic. So, and then as for the concerns, as noted by my fellow commissioners, in order for us to grant an exception, we would have to have compelling evidence that would support one of the findings that would be allowing for an exception. And I just wasn't hearing it. It sounds like there are other means of security that are in place. And then there's also this future business, but we can't consider that at this point in time. And so I can't find any compelling reasons to grant an exception. And then I would also add that in listening to our town traffic engineers, I mean, just the very concern alone about the viewing and stuff for the fence, whether it's open or not, is a very compelling thing to make sure that we get this set right. So I will see if there are any other comments from commissioners. And then if not, I would ask that someone make a motion. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I'll make a motion. I move to deny the appeal of a community development director decision to deny an exception to the town's fence regulations on property zoned R110 located at 755 Blossom Hill Road.
Thank you for that. Let's see, Commissioner Thomas.
I second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any additional comments from commissioners before I call the question? Okay, so we will go again with the roll call vote, and I will start with Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy.
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So the motion passes unanimously. And I will ask staff if there are appeal rights for this action by the commission.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are appeal rights. The decision of the commission can be appealed to the town council by any interested person as defined by Town Code Section 2910-020 within 10 days and on forms available online with fees paid. Final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right. So then that takes us through item 3, and we still have item 4. Get my paper out, which is requesting approval of a variance to allow drive-through at an existing restaurant, McDonald's, and modification to a conditional use permit for a drive-through restaurant on property zoned CH, located at 15475 Los Gatos Boulevard, APN 424-19-065. Variance application V-21-001 and conditional use permit application. I can't read the first numbers, but 21-005. Property owner, Franchise Realty Interstate Corporation. Applicant Mike Yao, Core States Group. Project planner is Aaron Walters. And before we do the staff report, I will ask if any commissioners have any disclosures on this item, and Commissioner Thomas and Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I live right behind the property, so I will be recusing myself.
Very good. And Commissioner Clark?
Thank you. Yes, I'm lucky enough to live near this McDonald's as well, and so I will be recusing myself from the item.
Okay, very good. And staff, just to clarify, with the recusal of the 2 commissioners, as well as the absence of Commissioner Tabata, we do have 4 planning commissioners, so that we have a quorum for this item, right?
Yes, and a majority of those present will make the decision.
Okay. Well, and then we'll deal with the fact that there's 4 of us if we get to that. So, okay. And could I also get a show of hands from commissioners that have visited the subject property? Okay, very good. And so I will turn it over to Ms. Walters for staff report.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. Before you tonight is a request for a variance to allow a prohibited use, a drive-through restaurant, and a request for approval for modification to an existing conditional use permit. The subject property is located at 15475 Los Gatos Boulevard. The 1.3 acre site is currently developed with an existing one-story fast food restaurant. The restaurant has been in operation since 1976. The applicant proposes to add a single drive-through lane and associated menu board with intercom system. A new order and pickup window are proposed on the east elevation of the building. Parking stalls would be reconfigured at the front of the building, and landscape areas adjacent to the drive-through lane are proposed to be enhanced. The applicant has provided a project description and a letter of justification that can be found in Exhibit 8 and development plans that can be found in Exhibit 17. The applicant is requesting a variance from the town code to allow a drive-through restaurant where the town code strictly prohibits this use in all zones. In 1977, the town council adopted an ordinance adding a section to the town code that prohibiting specific uses in all zones, which did include drive-in restaurants. The Jack in the Box restaurant, which is located at 15771 Los Gatos Boulevard, is the town's only drive-through restaurant. In 1983, the Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit to allow the operation of the existing Jack in the Box drive-through restaurant. That Jack in the Box drive-through restaurant was an existing non-conforming use that had predated the 1977 ordinance prohibiting drive-in restaurants. In 1984, McDonald's did apply for a variance requesting a drive-through at the subject site, and the application was denied by Planning Commission. In December of 2020, the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee considered a request for preliminary review for the proposal of a variance to allow a drive-through at the subject site, and discussion included questions regarding use, traffic, and noise. The applicant's response to CDAC comments are located in Exhibit 8. The technical reports prepared for this proposed project provide that the drive-through would not result in a significant impact to air quality, energy, or greenhouse gases, and that's discussed in Exhibit 13. The environmental noise assessment that's found in Exhibit 16 finds the noise impacts from the proposed intercom system can be mitigated by a condition of approval, requiring the volume level to be adjusted to meet town code requirements. The traffic impact analysis report states that the traffic generated by the drive-through at the site will not create a significant traffic issues and no significant VMT impacts. The applicant's team conducted extensive public outreach, and that can be found in Exhibits 14 and 15. Staff recommends denial of the variance and conditional use permit applications as the proposed drive-through restaurant is prohibited use in all zones pursuant to town code. And this concludes my report. Planning staff, engineering staff, and the town's traffic consultants are here and available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for the staff report. Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Raspy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, if I might. First, thank you to staff and to applicant for an exhaustive package full of information. I think it gives us a well-rounded view of what's envisioned at that property. I saw staff's recommendation was denial. I just want to clarify, is the sole reason for the denial that it would be in violation of our current no drive-through policy? And it wasn't specific to this application and it's any particulars, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm going to ask, and perhaps there's some historic knowledge here. I noted that in 1983, Jack in the Box got a drive-through, and then very next year, McDonald's was denied their drive-through. Do you know, is there any particular reason why this site was denied? Is there something applicable to this location as opposed to the Jack in the Box location that occurred in that time frame that we should be aware of? Or do you know?
Yes, thank you for the question. So actually the Jack in the Box site had an existing non-conforming use that predated that ordinance that prohibited drive-in restaurants. So the Jack in the Box was just coming forth with some modifications to their existing building, and as well as just in stating that they were having a non-conforming use. And then McDonald's was coming in with a restaurant that did not have a drive-through, and so that was a brand new proposal.
Thanks. And so another way of saying it is perhaps is this McDonald's be the first brand new drive-through under Los Gatos' ordinances. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And I'm sorry, one final question. And just because I want to understand the mechanics, assuming hypothetically we were to be predisposed to allow the drive-through and were to allow the amendment of the CUP, could we include in those amendments certain measures of modification? So for instance, number of visits to the site, screening, those types of requirements that would ameliorate the impact on the neighborhood. If we were inclined to grant a CUP, could we build those defense mechanisms into the process? I noticed when we looked at the Hillbrook application earlier today, there were specific traffic measures, for instance, and there were monetary violations for exceeding those. Are those the types of things that if we were inclined, we could build into this document as well?
I can start, and if Ms. Armour wants to continue, definitely with regards to screening, we see that hours of operation. With specifics to number of trips, I would defer to Ms. Armour or Mr. Paulson on those specifics with this type of application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think those are the types of things that could be applied. We are cautious about having ongoing monitoring requirements, especially for a small business like this. However, the other thing that I did want to add in response to your question is that another component of the staff concern was about the findings that are required for making issuing a variance. Those are pretty strict and specific requirements. And so if the Planning Commission finds that those findings could be made, then that is something that could be considered, but staff was concerned about the ability to make those findings in this particular case.
No, thanks. That's very helpful. And again, my question was largely hypothetical. I just wanted to understand the mechanics of the process as we go through it. But you've answered my questions. Thanks so much.
I have a question, and it's about the ordinance itself. When we were going through the general plan, as everyone knows, a lot of changes were made to the general plan, to make us more forward-looking into the year 2040 or up through the period of the 2040. So my question about the ordinance is, this ordinance was put in place in 1977, and I know when we were doing the general plan, we looked at a lot of things and about how businesses would operate, and considered whether or not our approach to it was relevant given the current times and the expectation of the future. So my question has any discussion been going on with town council over the recent times, let's say the last couple of years, about considering revisiting this ordinance? Because granting a variance, as noted, is very difficult. So it seems to me that the better way to approach this problem would be to revise the ordinance, even if it was somewhat restricted about how to do it. But has there been any movement on that front?
I see that Director Paulson has turned on his video so he can share. I don't believe there's been any specific discussion of that, but Director Paulson, if you have something else to add.
Thank you, Ms. Armour. Thank you, Chair Hansen. Yeah, Ms. Armour is correct. No, there hasn't been any discussion of, for instance, adding that to the ordinance list that, the council considers at the beginning of each year for, strategic priorities. This hasn't been high on the list. This is not a request we get very often. And so ultimately, that was one of the reasons that we took it to CDAC. The past, as was mentioned, with it being denied, and then ultimately as a prohibited use, we think that that was the appropriate path to get some initial guidance. But doing town code amendment is another option, which would obviously remove the variance requirement, but might have other unintended consequences should that be removed in its entirety.
Okay, I mean, clearly, if you restrict it to one conditional use permit, it would keep the floodgates from opening from others. But I wanted to kind of understand, where the town council's thinking was on this. So it sounds like that's not on the list right now. Vice Chair Barnett.
So I have a question for the town attorney. As I understand, to grant a variance to the conditional use permit, that there must be compliance with 292190. And that provides that there must be evidence. One moment here. Yeah, I'm sorry,
170.
170. Yeah. One says that because of special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, and surroundings. It goes on. So does the word including mean that the planning commission could make a finding in support of the variance on different grounds than size, shape, topography, etc.?
I think including does give the commission the right to consider things other than size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings. But I will say that the special circumstances should be related to features of the property. The variances are not really available for uses such as a drive-through restaurant use. Variances are available for things like changing the setback or changing building height, varying from a development standard, as opposed to using a variance to allow a different use. Case law is not supportive of granting variances for specific land uses.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. Much appreciated.
Commissioner Jana.
Just to follow up on that line of question, but if the ordinance itself is stating a drive-through purpose, and that is not something related to size, shape, topography, or something physical. I mean, if the ordinance itself, if that subject doesn't apply to the typical variance criteria that you've just described, town attorney, why wouldn't we be able to find a variance if the core ordinance is drive-through? That's a use.
Yeah, I think the ordinance prohibits drive-through restaurant uses. So it's a prohibited use, drive-through restaurant. If the commission, were, amenable to what the applicant is asking for, my recommendation would be to amend the town code rather than to grant a variance.
Thank you.
And question back to our town attorney, if we were to amend the town code, it would be applicable to other restaurant uses.
Yes, it'd be possible to limit the amendment to specific zoning districts, but it would apply uniformly within those zoning districts.
Okay. Okay, so that gives us some framework for how to consider it. Thank you. Are there other questions for staff from the commission at the moment? If not, I'm going to turn to the applicant. And the applicant has up to 5 minutes to address the commission.
So whoever would like to speak for the applicant's team, go ahead and raise your hand. You'll have up to 5 minutes for all members of your team. Looks like Mike. You should be able to unmute and you have up to 5 minutes. I will get your presentation momentarily.
Jennifer, hi. There will be another speaker who is the owner operator of the store. His name is Dan Borba. He'll go after me, but within the 5 minutes. can start with the site plan because I'm gonna talk briefly about the design first. All right, good evening, commissioners. My name is Mike Yao from Core Stage Group, architects, engineers representing McDonald's. As you can see in the site plan, a single drive-through lane is being proposed with an entrance at the southwest side of the property. New cash and pickup windows will be installed on the eastern side of the building, but will not alter the exterior design. The entrance to the drive-through will be marked by a gateway sign and clearance bar. There are 2 sets of ordering points laid out in a tandem configuration. Each order station will have an order canopy with built-in speaker box and an outdoor digital menu board. Jennifer, do you mind flipping to the first slide? I'm going to talk about the justification points. There you go. McDonald's is proposing to add drive-through in this location to meet the increasing demand for contactless ordering, most evident during this recent pandemic. It will provide the community the option to order food in a quicker, safer, and healthier way. Patrons are demanding contactless ordering to reduce the risk of being exposed to COVID-19 and other viruses. The proposed drive-through use is in the best interest of the public, even as the pandemic eases. It will provide accessibility to all community members, regardless of their socio-economic backgrounds. Diverse customer types who will benefit from the drive-through beyond the pandemic include people who have limited time and mobility to order food in the restaurant due to varying circumstances related to their jobs, family status, or physical condition. They are single mothers with children who prefer to grab food on the go. They are healthcare professionals and other trade workers who work non-typical hours with early morning or late night shifts. They are the elderly. They are handicapped persons who may not want to leave their vehicles due to their disabilities. The proposed drive-through design addresses comments received on December 9, 2020 during the CDAC hearing. To address issues regarding noise, landscape screening is proposed, and the volume of the outdoor menu speakers can be manually adjusted to meet required ambient noise levels. To address issues regarding traffic, a traffic impact and queuing analysis was submitted, and per the report, it is not expected that significant traffic issues will be created by the drive-through. Due to the large size of the site, any overflow can spill into the drive aisle at the rear of the property and won't cause blockage to site entrances. The community is supportive of the proposed drive-through and provided petition signatures placed inside the restaurant. From August 2021 to October 2022, there are around 2,600 signatures collected, and about 1,300 of those are from Los Gatos residents. Feedback was also collected from businesses and residents around the restaurant. Information was gathered through door-to-door canvassing and phone calls. Most businesses we talked to were in favor of the drive-through, with indifference being the most negative response. Resident feedback was mixed, but majority supported the drive-through. At this point, the restaurant owner operator, Mr. Dan Borba, would like to speak as well. Are you able to?
Hello,
Hello,
can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Okay, hi. My name is Dan Borba, and my wife Tammy and I have been in the business now. Well, we've owned that restaurant since 2016, but I've been involved with McDonald's for over 50 years. Basically, I started as a crew person, worked my way up. I worked for the owner operator who owned Los Gatos all those years ago. And excuse me, I am a little bit nervous. I'm not usually talking to large groups, so be gentle. Anyway, Tammy and I were both raised in San Jose, but we've been involved with Los Gatos almost like since I've been the manager there. And then again, I am now the owner since 2016. During this period in time, we have been heavily involved with the city of Los Gatos. I've helped schools, the museum. We've done teacher nights. We have helped the hospitals during COVID by providing food to the doctors and nurses. During major fire events, we provided meals to the firefighters. You know, I believe in giving back to the community. It's what's the right thing to do. basically at McDonald's, McDonald's owns the land. I am the franchisee. I have a 20-year lease. So I'm afraid sometimes when people hear the word McDonald's, they think of it as it's a big corporation. No, it's just me. It's me and my wife. We own a couple of stores, and we're in these stores. We run these stores on a daily basis. I'm very proud of the way this store runs. I understand some people have been in that location. I've hoped you've got good service. McDonald's is a place where a lot of kids get their first job. I enjoy it almost like being a teacher. We teach them how to work in a business. And some of these kids, as they're going through high school, when they go to college, they will even stay with us during college to work part-time and keep accumulate money. If we get this drive-through, I'll be able to hire more people and keep this going. One thing I like to include is that we did a remodel about 3 years ago. And a lot of comments we got from customers after we reopened was like, they're asking where the drive-through was. They were really expecting a drive-through. As Mike mentioned earlier, I get a lot of comments from from handicapped people, elderly people, mothers of small children. You know, they love to just be able to stay in their car. No, they got to take them out of the car.
Mr.
Yes,
Borba,
yes, ma'am.
Ms. Armour put her hand up, and so I think it means that your 5 minutes is up.
Okay.
But you'll have an additional opportunity. Well, first of all, I will see if any commissioners have questions for you, and then second of all, there will be an additional opportunity to make additional comments after we take public comments. So let me see if any commissioners have questions for you. Okay, I don't see any at this time. So just hold tight, and then we will, we're going to go to public comments. And so I'm going to ask if any members of the public would like to speak to the commission on this item. And we would ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. We have a couple hands up.
Yes, so we will start with Guadalupe. You should be able to unmute yourself, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak. Well, I am a single father of 2 little girls, and my mother lives in Los Gatos. I commute from San Jose to Los Gatos all the time. And then just having something in Los Gatos, like a quick drive-through to get a quick meal for my kids and actually my parents, would be actually really great. And it will actually cut time in the morning, you know, being a single father and having 2 little girls, it could get really crazy. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do any commissioners have questions for Mr. Vasquez? Okay, Commissioner Janoff.
Yes, thank you. Question for you, Mr. Vasquez. Do you work in Los Gatos and live in San Jose, or is your commute to Los Gatos strictly for family reasons?
So I live in San Jose, but I commute to Los Gatos. My mom and my dad live in Los Gatos.
So you don't work here, you're coming for a personal visit?
Yeah, and then my parents help me take care of my kids. So I do stop by a McDonald's to time to take some breakfast for them in their morning coffee.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So thank you for your comments. And it looks like we have some others.
Yes, Kaylee, you should be able to unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi there. I am, my name is Kaylee Moran. I was born and raised. I am a 34-year-old mother of 2, and everybody in my house goes to McDonald's for coffee and Diet Cokes and I just think that the drive-through would be it seems to be welcomed based off of all the signatures, and I don't think it would change our town character. And I know that I had a son in 2020, and it would have been helpful on multiple occasions to be able to just drive through. And now I have a new baby, and it would be even more helpful if I could go through the drive-through as they've touched on, the owners and the manager. And my mom, she also went through a knee replacement surgery in the last couple of years. And so I definitely think that there's the type of people who would see a larger benefit to the drive-through as opposed to any negatives. And I hope that we can get the variance accepted for this location. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Do any commissioners have questions for Ms. Moran? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So then next speaker.
Next speaker is Eli. You should be able to unmute, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Eli Vega. I do work in Los Gatos. I've been working there as a medical assistant for over 5 years. So I just think that, having a drive-through would really benefit not just me, but many people that work in Los Gatos when you have only like a 30-minute lunch and you just have to grab, you need to grab something quick to eat. I just feel like that would really help many of us working there in Los Gatos. So I just think that having, a drive-through would be a really good idea for many of us.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments, Ms. Vega. Do any commissioners have questions for our speaker? I don't see anyone. So then we'll go to the next speaker.
Next speaker is Ruth. You should be able to unmute, and you have up to 3 minutes, Ruth.
Yes, hi. I have grandkids. I have 3 grandkids. I love taking them to McDonald's after school. I say twice a month. When they behave and they're good in school, I like to take them. But since it's cold now, and I get sick a lot, I would rather have them take them but go through drive-throughs. But I guess I've been asking a lot, but they say they don't know when they're gonna open the drive-through. So it would be really helpful if we get a drive-through.
Thank you for your comments, Ruth. Do any commissioners have questions for the speaker? Okay, I don't see any. I don't see anyone with their hands raised. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the commission in public comments about this application?
I don't see any additional hands raised, Chair.
Okay, so then we can go back to the applicant, and you have up to an additional 3 minutes to address the commission.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess this is the closing statement part.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so we are requesting that the variance application and CUP modification be approved because the drive-through will provide access to all types of members of Los Gatos community. As you've heard with people who shared, it will champion inclusivity. McDonald's is deprived of serving diverse members of the public, like handicapped persons, single mothers, the elderly, and people who are on the go because of the nature of their jobs. Right now, McDonald's customers do not have the same access to convenience and safety that Jack in the Box offers its customers because they have a drive-thru. These people do not have options in Los Gatos for ordering food in a more convenient, healthier, and safer way, especially beginning of the pandemic, and people have changed their minds in terms of how they eat inside a restaurant. They are more cautious now, and providing a drive-thru would give them that healthier and safer option.
Thank you for that. I think you still have some time left. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, Mr. Borba, as well?
Dan Borba, if you did want to unmute, you should be able to speak, and you do have 2 more minutes.
Well, I'm just curious if there's any questions that you guys would like to ask me. It seems like I get the feeling that a lot of the public, they want the drive-through, and it seems like, I don't want to keep repeating what Mike said, but there used to be complaints about air pollution. Well, I don't know how many. I see a ton of electric cars now, so I don't know if that is a real issue anymore. I know there was a lot of concerns about noise pollution, and we have the ability nowadays to turn that speaker down. I know when they draw the plans up, they're planning to put walls around that speaker so that almost nobody behind us, which were the nearest residential areas behind us. And I've had a number of drive-throughs, and the speed, customers, they'll be able to get in and out of there in a minute and a half. I take pride in running good restaurants because I was just raised that way. And I'm known among the McDonald's franchisees in the Bay Area to run top operations. So I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I'm welcome to questions from you guys. So hopefully I can explain things or take care of some concerns you may have. So I'll stop there. I don't know if my 3 minutes are up.
Well, and there's always the opportunity for questions as well. I have a question for you, and you may or may not know the answer to this, but are there any other McDonald's in the area that do not have drive-throughs because of an ordinance by the local jurisdiction?
I don't know if that be, if Drew is on, he's construction manager. Thinking out loud, the only one I know of is on Winchester Boulevard, and I don't know why. I don't own that restaurant. So I think that's the only one I really know.
Okay. All right. So there is one, but we don't know why
Right. And I know they're attempting to get a drive-through also. I'm not sure where they are. Maybe it's approved, but again, that's the city of San Jose. So it's not my restaurant. So I really have no idea what's going on.
I knew that when I asked you the question, since you only own some that you might not know that, but I mean, I think that kind of information is helpful to this discussion. But we have other questions for you, Commissioner Janoff.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to dig down a little bit to the design aspects of what you're requesting. I noted in the package that the volume level is manually controlled. Does that mean that a driver in a car can adjust the volume and kind of fool around with it, or is it a manual control that only someone from within the restaurant can handle?
It would be from within the restaurant. There's basically a control box that we can go in there, and if we hear complaints that it's too loud or or even too low, sometimes we can actually turn up the microphone or turn it down.
Okay, so the
microphone
volume is controlled from within the restaurant.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Another question. I didn't notice in the package how you're planning to advertise that there's a drive-through now at this location. And certainly, maybe this is a question for staff, but would there be restriction? We probably wouldn't want to see the 30-foot high pole with a McDonald's and drive-through sign on it. Would that be, I'm not sure who the question goes to, whether that's a staff that the sign ordinance would control, or whether the McDonald's owner has a more discreet sign in mind.
I think Ms. Walters has a comment for you.
Great, thank you for the question. Any new signage would be subject to the town's sign code. And so we would be reviewing whatever's proposed to make sure it met the town's code requirements.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Barnett.
Mr. Borba, earlier,
Yes.
Thank you. Earlier in the hearing, the staff indicated that the Jack in the Box was in effect grandfathered based on the law at that time, and now we have the ordinance that prohibits drive-through. Do you have any comments about that set of circumstances?
it just, as a layman, it does seem a little strange that Jack in the Box could have a drive-through. And the owner of that location, I opened that store up, but I was a manager back in the late 1970s. And my owner back then, Don Leffler, I know he tried, he went to Los Gatos to try to get a drive-through, and I don't know, I don't understand why, I guess. And and that's where I can make a burger, but I don't want to run a city. You know, it doesn't seem, how can you say, it doesn't seem right. You know, I'm sure there's very good reasons why this wasn't allowed, but I don't know if those reasons are still current. I don't know. I don't know if I really answered your question or not. I'm sorry if I did.
Okay, and then I have a second question, if I might, Chair.
Go ahead.
So also earlier in the hearing, the town attorney expressed an opinion that there needed to be some special circumstances to grant a variance based on the property size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings. And I didn't hear any comment from you or anyone on your behalf regarding that requirement. Do you have a response?
I would need a little bit more of a explanation of that. I mean, the building won't change in size. We have to reconfigure the parking lot, but I got so much parking on that location, it's crazy. So, and I know, so Mike, maybe you can help with that.
Yeah, I can chime in on that. So the property is located in a commercial zone, specifically within the CH zone or restricted highway commercial zone, which is far from residential uses. I believe Jack in the Box is in the same zone. So I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this correctly, but I think we are not enjoying the same privilege that they are in terms of serving the diverse types of community members that I've mentioned. That's my thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Yao.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions that we have for the applicant. So I'm going to close the public hearing and turn to the commission to see if you have any additional questions for staff. Any comments on the application? And I don't know that we're ready for a motion yet, but that will happen. So Commissioner Janoff.
Yeah, thank you. While the hearing is going on, I'm looking at the code section 29.10.045 section B, and I note that it says drive-in restaurant, not drive-through restaurant. Maybe it's a technicality, but in my mind, a drive-through is a completely different food delivery model than a drive-in. You know, a drive-in, you think of people parking and the people coming to your car with the, you know, roller skates or whatever. And so that's to me what a drive-in is. A drive-through is different. I'd be willing to say that this is a technicality that we could find for the applicant around. I think there's a compelling reason for a drive-through. All of the reasons that the various public speakers have indicated. I know I personally have driven more miles to get to a drive-through than I should because I can't drive through in Los Gatos. And so there's an argument around VMT. I think we could make that this is actually going to help the community rather than hurt regarding vehicle miles traveled. So that's my initial thinking.
Okay, and our town attorney had her hand up before I go to Commissioner Raspy.
If memory serves, I think I talked about the definition of drive-in with Director Paulson. And Director Paulson, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the code does define drive-in to mean drive-through. So I just wanted to put that out there. But it is definitely up to the commission as to whether or not the commission can make the findings.
And we do have, we have quoted the definition of drive-in within the staff report. We did include that as a description, and you will see in that definition that it does include those who are driving through, to pick up. And it is based on the definition rather than the term itself that staff made this interpretation. Ms. Walters, do you have the staff report there in front of you? Could you read that out? I think that would be helpful.
Yes, of course. The definition for drive-in restaurant is a restaurant where food or beverages are sold to be eaten in vehicles, whether on or off the premises, or are delivered directly to occupants of vehicles. And that's on page 2 under the background section. That's on page 2 of the staff report.
And so because we don't have another definition, another term that is drive-through, and that definition did seem to apply to what is being described here. That was the interpretation, but we do look forward to the discussion from the commission.
Okay, and thank you for that. I'm going to go to Commissioner Respi, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Janoff.
Thanks, Chair. Just my preliminary thoughts are, for all the reasons that our public participants gave us, I think a drive-through is probably a great idea. It would have served and did serve a lot of communities during the pandemic, and even though that has subsided, I suspect that's going to be an ongoing concern for a lot of people. And in addition to those individuals, we have people with disabilities, the aged, et cetera, who I think could avail themselves of a drive-through. And so I think it would have a beneficial impact upon our community. And based on all the reports we have, I think the impacts would be slight, not none, but not egregious. All that being said, I don't think that this applicant has satisfied the 2 criteria. I don't know that there is any special circumstances to this location that allows the use of a variance. There's nothing in the topography or the shape or any other of these structural elements of the property that I think would require us to make that finding. And so I don't see it. And then lastly, the applicant relies on the jack-in-the-box for both variance findings. And I think based on what staff has informed us, that case is distinguishable in that was a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's not a new variance permitted under in this law. And so I don't think we can use jack-in-the-box as kind of a reason to allow this other use. And so while I would like to see perhaps this place become or have a drive-through available itself, I think maybe the best way to do it is changing the town laws to allow those uses. Now that would, as I think has been mentioned previously, open the floodgates to other businesses. And maybe that's something we don't want to do. But I think based on a strict reading of what's before us, I don't know that we can satisfy the 2 criteria for a variance in this case. And I'm kind of sorry to say that, but that's the way I read it.
Okay, thank you for that. Commissioner Janoff.
Yeah, thank you. So back to the definition that staff provided, can you explain where that definition came from? And does it reside in town code anywhere that someone could say, oh yeah, okay, this is included?
Yes, thank you for the question. It is in the definition section of town code. That is a specific defined term. As Ms. Armour stated, drive-through is not defined, but drive-in is.
Thank you.
Okay. I have personal experience with this. My youngest child is now in college, but we've lived here in Los Gatos for 22 years, and so when my kids were younger, I can remember so many times where I was taking them from one thing to another, and dinner had to happen in between. And the only way that there was time for dinner to happen in between would be to go to a drive-through. And so I can't tell you the number of times that we went to Jack in the Box because they had a drive-through. And would we have gone to McDonald's if they had a drive-through? Probably, although my kids do like Jack in the Box, but nonetheless, I find this whole situation very troubling. And I'm going to go back to, what I said earlier about the general plan. I mean, when we were looking at things, I mean, there was a thinking, some time ago when I worked on the 2020 general plan, 12, 14 years ago, where they were like, yes, we need to keep the auto deals here. Well, that's not really practical, and retail is evolving, and we can't insist on only having retail downtown because it just might not be available. So I have to wonder if this thing isn't kind of outdated, but I don't see anything in place to make the change to the town code. And I would hate to put that on the applicant. I mean, I think they said that they're all about running their business, and they're doing this thing with a handicap behind their back because other locations have drive-throughs, and Jack in the Box has a drive-through and happens to be just down the street from them. So I don't know, but I also see that looking at the requirements for finding, for a variance are challenging. So the only thing I can think of is, because Jack in the Box already has theirs, they're sort of at a competitive disadvantage. I'm trying to think if this holds water or not. And also the fact that their property is very well suited for, because there's other, fast food retailers in town where they're in a shopping center and they couldn't possibly figure out how to do a drive-through. These guys already have a setup where they have a huge parking lot. So I don't know. I'm kind of running this by with staff to see if we have any thing that we can, if that would hold up in terms of logic, in terms of helping them find for variance, because I don't see the alternative happening. I mean, I was on the CDAC when we heard this back during the pandemic, and at least one of our town council members, the CDAC has 3 planning commissioners and 2 town council members, and although there was a lot of encouragement for the process, the response from one of the town council members was, you can figure out other ways during the pandemic to get food to your customers. And, and that was an even more challenging situation than now. So I don't know that they have another path other than us fighting for the variance. So I don't know if staff has any comment, but Commissioner Janoff also has her hand up.
I'll pause for staff, but I'd like to ask a similar question. I mean, it seems to be, if you think about it in the way that has been presented, there's no, it's like a gotcha. You're here before the planning commission, but the planning commission can't do anything because the rules for variance are what they are. And, so it begs the question for me, why is planning commission even hearing this matter? And then I think, well, let's get creative about it, because it feels to me very much like this is a change to the McDonald's that the community is in favor of. It sounds like the planning commission, at least the members you've heard from, are generally in favor. So how about this? Can we find that the special circumstances of location / surrounding, in that the broader location / surrounding encompasses a Jack in the Box with a drive-through down the street, that they can use is an undue hardship for this same business model that's not permitted to have a drive-through? And I'm just really trying to think broadly, like how the location and surrounding is, it's in a zone where this kind of business should be able to operate. It's in proximity to a business that does operate this way. And just by virtue of timing, we've got this full stop. I mean, I'm looking to the town attorney to help out here. We are looking for a way to help this happen. I think it's a mistake to change the code because I'm not sure that we want every possible food vendor to be able to then say, yeah, we want to drive through. I mean, could Purple Onion do that on the corner of College and Main? You can see where these could cause problems if it was just opened up. This is a good location for this kind of an application. And I'd really like to find a way that we can make this variance and make it stick. So I'm really looking for some advice from the town attorney to help us out here.
Okay, well, it's definitely up to the commission as to whether the commission can make the findings. And so you have made a case for making the first finding. And then the commission would also want to think about the second element that's required to grant a variance. And that is the granting of the variance would not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and zone in which such property is situated. So that's the second element that the commission will want to think about.
So when I look at this item, I'm looking at a standalone restaurant whose business model internationally, well, maybe not in Europe, is in the United States is based on a drive-through, fast food, convenience food business model. There are other food service businesses in the proximity, but not with the ability to have the drive-through traffic circulation the way that is planned for this property. It seems like a natural, it would be very easy and with minimal disruption to make this happen. I don't think it would grant special privileges that are inconsistent with the limitation on other property, in my opinion.
And I like where you're going with this. I think I concur with what you said. I mean, I think that when I look at all the other food retailers in town, it would be, they don't enjoy the same possibilities of being able to do this, whereas McDonald's is already in a situation where it's very easy to do that, and they've done an incredible amount of research to show that it's not problematic. Commissioner Respi.
Thanks, Chair. I actually appreciate the thinking on ways to make this happen. I think the second criteria is less problematic to me. I think we can satisfy that without much difficulty. The first one is the special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, and surroundings. Perhaps we can make the argument that the ability of Jack in the Box, which is located nearby, influences this property, and as a result, we can make that argument. And I'm just, again, thinking out loud, do we then create an issue where other properties on Los Gatos Boulevard have that argument? Can Happy Hound make that argument now? Can Classic Burger, whatever else is in that stretch? Are we creating an exception that swallows a rule within a specific geographic zone? And again, I'm happy that we can creatively try to work a solution to this problem. What I don't want to do is create a different problem by trying to solve this one.
Fair enough. No, well said. Commissioner Janoff.
I think that I see where you're going. And I have two thoughts. One is maybe it wouldn't be so bad for those fast food businesses to also be able to take advantage of this convenience, and maybe the town of Los Gatos residents and visitors to the town would appreciate having a drive-through Happy Hound. And keeping in mind that these are very fast food business models, right? So they're turning these things, you couldn't do it with Aldo's at the Vasona station, right? Because you can't prepare, chicken fettuccine in a minute and a half, right? So there are business models where this just doesn't make sense. But I think we could also argue this is strange because we're arguing in the affirmative rather than than in the negative, right? But this property is so perfectly capable of the traffic flow. It's not going to impede on any traffic coming and going on Los Gatos Boulevard. It's not on the corner of a small street. Like even Jack in the Box backs right up to a residential neighborhood, and it's a very small street that it's on the corner of. This is a completely open, easily accessed area, and I think that if we can add the positive to why this makes sense to our interest in granting the variance, then that may further restrict other similar businesses from trying to access this type of variance. I'm not sure if that's making sense, but that's what I've got.
But I like where you're going with it, Commissioner Respi.
No, I agree, and I appreciate the response. And I agree. I think more options, more convenient options, again, serves our community, especially as we age and as we try to be more inclusive. I think that's great. Then this brings me back to where I opened my earlier comments and questions I had for staff. If we presupposed, again, for the sake of discussion, that we were to grant a variance, I would think we'd want to build into that model then protections for our community, greater than are presented in the current application. So for instance, could we build in a cap on number of visits? Could we build in maximum wait times, for instance, as we sit there? Those types of things that would hopefully address some of the community concerns, environmental concerns, those types of things, which I think are really the downsides to having a drive-through in that location.
Let's see, I'll go to Ms. Armour, but then Vice Chair Burnett and Commissioner Janoff as well.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to suggest we do have a number of different resources to discuss the impacts of the drive-through in terms of queuing. And since we did have a traffic report that was prepared, Mr. Kim, the town engineer, is here, as well as our senior traffic engineer and somebody from the consultants team. And so if there are questions from the commission about the anticipated wait times, anticipated lines based on this proposed use as it's described, that is also a resource to support your discussion as well.
Okay. Commissioner Respi, would you, they're both,
Sure. And what I'll do is, I read the written materials, and what it sounded like was based on our current understanding, the effects would be de minimis. And I think that's what we all hope for. I guess my concern is, what happens if in 6 months or a year, the line is queuing longer or the wait times are longer? Can we build in some kind of protections into an approval? Again, speaking 5 steps down the road, if we were to grant an approval, where we could protect our town from the drive-through overwhelming the property, overwhelming that location. I would think that would be a good part of our discussion. And maybe what we should do is, when the commission if we believe we were going to grant some kind of variance and approval, then at that point we could collectively and with the engineers decide what we thought would be good protections to build into that approval. But I think we haven't cleared the first hurdle yet of whether we want to grant the approval or not.
Thank you for that question. I would say that you can craft a condition, for example, that would say that queuing for the drive-through could not extend beyond the property line, that would be a violation of their conditional use permit. A condition of that sort could be used, and then if that became a problem, it could become a code enforcement issue that the town could work with the property owner to prevent that from happening in the future.
That's a great suggestion. Well, I mean, I'm going to go to Vice Chair Bernard and Commissioner Janoff, but after they get done talking, might be helpful to hear from the senior traffic engineer or our town engineer about what things they would be most worried about if this were to be approved, to guide us in terms of, if we wanted to put any conditions on it, if it's the will of this group to go forward with that. So Vice Chair Barnett and then Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very sympathetic to the application. I think for all the reasons that have been mentioned, I do think it's an ideal site for a drive-through. However, I'm reluctant to approve the variance because of the opinion of the town attorney that we can't make finding number 1 because it relates to a usage rather than to a characteristic of the property. And that's my basic feeling, and I would be inclined to vote against a motion to approve the variance because of that circumstance. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. Just to respond to Commissioner Raspy, I personally am not concerned about limiting traffic. And in fact, I think we don't want to limit traffic because the whole business model for McDonald's success and any drive-through success is to maximize drive-through. But I think Ms. Armour's suggestion for ensuring that the cars are within the property line or queuing within the property line is a good one to include should we get to a CUP. And keeping in mind how large this property is, and that the traffic comes in from Los Gatos Boulevard and goes literally all the way around the building to place an order, means you've got, I think I read in the report there was room for 14 cars to queue, which seems it seems like quite a number compared to other drive-throughs that I've experienced. But I would pause for a moment to go back to the town attorney and ask whether, in light of Commissioner Barnett's, Vice Chair Barnett's reluctance to make a motion based on a variance on item number 1, is there any merit to the suggestion that I made that we can say location and surrounding within the proximity of the drive-through Jack in the Box is creating an undue hardship for this business that has a model for drive-through? Is that help? I'm wanting the town attorney to help us understand whether we have any ground to stand on here.
Based on the comments I've heard from the commission, if the commission were interested in pursuing the grant of a variance, I would be inclined to base it on the large size of the property, like given the large size of the property and its ability, to accommodate the queuing, the strict application of the ordinance is depriving the property
of
a privilege that's enjoyed by other properties of the same size. Of what I've heard, I think that's the most defensible, that it's a large property and it can accommodate it. And the other property that's of a similar size also accommodates it.
And in effect, that would limit other potential businesses from getting a variance because they wouldn't have perhaps the same size to accommodate what they're asking for.
Right, because the second finding is it a grant of special privileges? And so if this variance were granted, the town would probably want to be prepared to grant a variance to another property that came along that was of the same size. And also, and in the same area, the vicinity.
We're talking about physical size, like the size of the building, not the size of the building, but the size of the lot to accommodate the vehicle traffic. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then, based on, having lived in Los Gatos for 22 years, I can't think of many or if any properties. It would be a very small list of properties if there's no floodgate issue. So at least based on where we stand now. Commissioner Raspy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, based on what it sounds like the majority of the commission is leaning towards and the opinion of town council, can we, I'd like to hear from the traffic engineers and the town engineer perhaps on what they spot as concerns, if any, and what might we build into our approval, if any, that could help ameliorate those.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for your question. But yes, I think this site does lend itself because of the size of the site. The queuing study done by the original traffic consultant showed that there was sufficient space so they would not exceed, the queue would not extend beyond the property line. Our traffic consultant, who is also here this evening, and if you have more specific detailed questions, I'll defer to him with TJKM. They also confirmed. In fact, the applicant at one point had measures to address if the queue extended beyond what they anticipated. And our peer review consultant indicated they didn't think that would ever be necessary because there was substantial space available for queuing. So I think that is very pertinent. I don't know of any other sites that there may be some, but I'm not familiar with other sites that would be able to say the same thing. And regarding other traffic impacts, that they did a transportation analysis and it showed no significant impacts in any other area. It also, regarding the VMT, I think one of the commissioners mentioned that it may be a reduction that we don't have a VMT bank, but I think it may save VMT, and they did do analysis of the VMT and decided it was primarily local serving. So even though there would be a significant number of new trips generated, at least half of those would be trips that are already going down Los Gatos Boulevard, referred to as pass-by trips. And also the assumption is 50%, which is fairly conservative. It may be higher, but that was the rate that was assumed. So if there are any further questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Commissioner Raspy, did you feel like we should talk to the consultant? I mean, I feel like they, our traffic engineer answered this and gave a lot of evidence, but you know.
No, I think that satisfies me, especially the queuing issue. Again, my sense is I'm using kind of a belt and suspenders. We would probably want to build something into the approval for a circumstance that probably never accrues, but better to have it than not to have it. Just one more question for staff. And I noticed that we have an estimated traffic impact mitigation fee, again, assuming approval, of almost $270,000, which is significant. How is that utilized by the town? Where does it go? How is it used?
That was developed, we did a nexus study, I believe it was in 2014, which identified projects throughout town. A lot of them are bike and pedestrian projects. Some of them have been completed, some haven't. We're currently, but the money would go to those, which does include ped and bike projects, as well as other improvements, transportation improvements throughout town. We are currently working on a new transportation impact fee, which would include a VMT fee, but that has not been, that's probably still, or it hasn't been yet concluded. So the current fee would be just around $270,000 and would go towards transportation improvements throughout town, including bike and ped improvements.
Is that a one-time fee? Is it annual? Or how's that?
No, that's a one-time fee that the applicant pays prior to pulling the building permit.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? I would just comment that I feel comfortable with the logic that Commissioner Janoff has suggested for how we could grant the variance. I mean, it's a little bit unusual in terms of, how you might approach this kind of thing, but I think it's well grounded in terms of how to think about it, in terms of, and also when we're thinking about not wanting to open floodgates for other properties, but still trying to make this happen. So, and I also feel good about the, the comments of our traffic engineer in terms of, I don't think there's a lot of risk that could happen with this, but we could certainly add a condition that, about the queue not spilling out into the street. So then I'm hoping, well, let's see if there's more comments. Vice Chair Burnett.
Thank you. In view of the further opinion by the town attorney, I feel that I can support the application for the variance and the CUP. I think the findings necessary for the CUP 1 through 4 can easily be made. And I agree that 292170 subparagraph 2 is applicable. So I would support a motion subject to any modifications or conditions that might be agreed upon.
All right, that sounds great. Commissioner Raspy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the variance to allow, and I notice I'm looking at the conditions, and condition 9 provides that live entertainment until 10 p.m. is permitted at the premises, and I'm curious why that's part of this application. Is there anticipated live entertainment going to be at this location, or should that be eliminated from this document?
Hi, thank you for the question. It wasn't asked specifically from the applicant. However, with the current live entertainment allowance for restaurants, that's just been being typically included in the conditions of approval. So that isn't something that was requested by the applicant.
Is it the case then that if we were inclined, we could remove that condition? I don't know that anybody feels strongly about it. I'm just curious.
I believe so. I do think the town code allows it by right till 10, or there's a policy right now that allows that till 10 p.m. right now. And Jennifer, Ms. Armour could clarify that.
Yes, that is correct. And so if it was removed, then it still would be allowed based on town code, even if it wasn't specifically specified in the conditional use permit.
Okay, thanks so much for answering my question. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we could, if it was the will of the commission, to put that in as a condition, even though it flies in the face of our town code, right?
I believe that condition is consistent with town code, so it could be included or not.
Okay, got it. Okay. We'll see where we are. All right. Other comments or questions? Or is one of you ready to make a motion? Commissioner Jana.
I'm going to try a motion if my voice will hold out. Excuse me. I move to approve a variance to allow drive-through use at an existing restaurant, McDonald's, a modification to a conditional use permit for a drive-through restaurant on property zoned CH, APN 424-19065, property owner Franchise Realty Interstate Corporation, applicant Mike Yao, Core States Group. I can make the findings required for CEQA. I can make the required findings for granting a variance application as required by Town Code Section 29.20.170, granting a variance application because of special circumstance applicable to the property size. And I can make the finding number 2, and granting the variance would not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity. I can make the required findings for a conditional use permit as defined in Exhibit 2. And we want to add a condition to prohibit queuing beyond the property line to the conditions of approval.
Sounds good. Commissioner Raspy.
I'll second the motion.
All right, good. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion that you want to have before I call the question? Okay, I'm not seeing.
I would like to just like to add that the language that the town attorney provided in terms of the rationale that we're using regarding the property size be included in the motion.
Okay, I think that's a good add. Does the seconder agree to that?
It does. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, well then I will go ahead and call the question and I'll start with Commissioner Raspy,
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So it passes unanimously. And I'm going to ask staff if there are appeal rights for this action by the commission.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are. The decision of the commission can be appealed to town council by any interested person as defined by town code, section 2910-020 within 10 days on forms available online with fees paid. Final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay, so we have gotten through all of our hearings for this evening and we can move on to other business. And I was told we need to call back Commissioners Thomas and Commissioner Clark. Are they logged in?
So Commissioner Thomas is, and I am promoting her to panelist so that she can rejoin us.
All right, and not.
But I do not see Commissioner Clark.
All right, I just sent her a text. But we'll go ahead and proceed forward and then hopefully she'll join in. Okay. Okay. Oh, Ms. Emery.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of order. I wanted to check on the motion and second for the consent calendar. I have the vote written down, but I do not remember a motion and second being made for that. So I wanted to check in with the town attorney to see if we did need to do something to rectify that, or if I just missed it and somebody can give me those.
Did I forget to ask for a motion in a second? Okay,
I
guess
believe
I
so.
did.
We were talking about the recusals,
Okay.
so I think we passed
Okay.
by that.
Okay, oh gosh. So what can we do about that so that we don't cause a problem for ourselves? So.
Consent items to be acted upon by a single motion. So I think we can have a motion and a second and do the vote now.
We do
So-
have the commissioners back again. Commissioner Clark has rejoined us, so if you wanted to redo the consideration of the consent calendar, you do have the commissioners here now.
Okay, and Commissioner Clark, I didn't know if you heard the whole thing, but apparently in all the procedural stuff and discussion about the recusal, I neglected to ask for a motion in a second on the consent calendar. So we're going to just pretend like we didn't do it before and we're going to revote. So could I get a motion for approval of the consent calendar? Commissioner Janoff.
So moved.
And can I get a second? Commissioner Clark.
Second.
Great. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for approval of the consent calendar, and I will call the question, starting with Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy.
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes, with the abstention as to item number 2.
Yes, understood. And I vote yes as well, so it passes unanimously. And do you have everything that you need? Okay, all right, very good. So sorry about that. Okay. We can move on to other business, which starts with the report from the Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, since we did not hold planning commission meetings in October, I have a few different items to report out on from the work that the town council has been doing in the meantime. At the beginning of October, on October 4th, they did consider and adopt a resolution confirming suspension of the land use and community design elements of the 2040 general plan as a result of the referendum on those two items qualifying for the ballot, and establishing that the 2020 general plan, land use, and community design elements will govern during the period of suspension. There was also further conversation about the next steps for the general plan, referendum, and housing element at the following meeting on October 18th. And then the first meeting in November, on November 1st, the town council considered a number of planning related items, including new building and fire codes and associated reach codes, an exception request, story pool exception request for a project on Winchester Boulevard, which is expected to come to Planning Commission in the next month or so for consideration, and approval of the first reading of a new Senate Bill 9, SB 9 ordinance. And that was also considered on November 1st. I also want to share that we have upcoming meetings in the coming weeks, including two special meetings. Special meeting of the Historic Preservation Committee because of Thanksgiving will not be held on the day before Thanksgiving, but will be on the 16th of November. And that will be a 3 p.m. start time for that meeting. And because we do not have a second meeting of Planning Commission in November, also because of the Thanksgiving holiday, there will be a special Planning Commission meeting on Monday, November 21st. That will be at the normal 7 p.m. time. Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Janoff, if you have your hand up. Okay, you didn't mean to. Okay, all right. So Commissioner Thomas, you have your hand. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question for staff. When will we be receiving our packets if the meeting is on Monday? Is it still the Friday before, or will it be before that? Just curious about like the legality of changing the dates and everything.
Yeah, it could be as late as Friday, but we are hoping to get you a packet on Wednesday or Thursday, if it's feasible to get that pulled together and delivered.
Okay, no, I mean, no rush. I was just curious.
No, we recognize that it is earlier than the usual Wednesday date, and we want you to have the time to consider the written materials. I think legally, and the town attorney can correct me, but legally, because it's a special meeting, it doesn't require that it be provided any sooner than the Friday. But we recognize the work that you put in and do hope to be able to get it to you sooner than that.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a great question. Thank you for that. All right, so then we'll move on to subcommittee reports. In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, every member of the Planning Commission serves in an additional capacity on a subcommittee. And in the case of this Planning Commission, we support the Historic Preservation Committee, the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, and the General Plan Committee. And at this time, the General Plan Committee is largely taking the form of the Housing Element Advisory Board, which includes some additional community members. However, we did actually have a General Plan meeting recently. So I will ask if there's any committee reports and especially since the Planning Commission hasn't met since the end of September. Are there reports from Historic Preservation, Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, or the General Plan / Housing Element Advisory Board? But I'll start with Historic Preservation. Do you have a report for us? Commissioner Raspy.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, the HPC met. This most latest meeting was October 26th. And at that session, we considered, again, we had a full calendar consisting largely of either removal of homes from the inventory and additions and modifications to historic structures. After long and thoughtful discussion and debate, the HPC rendered its decisions, and it seems to be functioning busily, if not properly.
Very good. Okay. And Conceptual Development Advisory Committee?
Yes, Chair. The Conceptual Development Advisory Committee met this afternoon to discuss an application for preliminary review of a proposal for construction of 2 multifamily buildings in a mixed-use project, Zone CCH, and the application was reviewed, and there was certainly input, productive input from the committee members, and hopefully the developer will take notice of those comments and as he goes forward with the application.
Very good. Okay, and then I chair the General Plan Committee and the Housing Element Advisory Board. So the General Plan Committee, for the first time in quite a long time, we actually had a meeting. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And we considered a general plan amendment to add policies from the community design element to the hazards and safety element. And these came down from CAL FIRE and the people that we're dealing with. And what the issue was is that these policies were in the 2040 approved general plan in the community design element. And since the community design element was referended, we still wanted to have those policies in the general plan. So they were moved to the hazards and safety element so that we could comply with the state regulatory agencies that are involved with the fire. And we did recommend approval of that. Some people asked questions about whether or not we had to worry about having too many amendments, especially with things being up in the air with the general plan. But it sounds like we're going to be covered because the clock starts again in after December 31st. And also the Housing Element Advisory Board met one time, and we simply met to have an opportunity to take additional comments and ask questions about the draft of the housing element that went to the Housing and Community Development Organization, who's currently reviewing it under a 90-day timeframe. So we don't expect to get their comments back fully until January, but we had a chance to review the document that was sent to them. And I believe we're meeting again next week in anticipation of some potential comments that we might get. We have questions from Vice Chair Barnett and Commissioner Thomas.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Thomas.
Oh, I just wanted to say that at the Housing Element Advisory Board meeting, we also discussed like potential feedback that we will receive. So, and staff is like already working on solutions to some of the issues that might come up with our initial draft, because we know that we are going to get feedback based on what other local, well, statewide, I guess, towns and cities are getting. So that was really helpful too. And that meeting was on the 20th, and the general plan committee meeting was on the 23rd.
Actually, it was on the 26th, but
wait, what?
I just looked at the October 26th. Anyways, but
oh yeah, you're right, the 26th. Yes,
very good. Yes. And so the meeting next week, I believe, is entirely devoted to the anticipation of comments that we're going to get to from the HCD, and to help us get prepared so that we're not hit with a landslide in January. Okay, good. Well, thank you everyone for your reports, and thank you to everyone for your great comments during all of our hearings this evening. And we appreciate your service. And I will say this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you all on the 21st.
Bye.
Good night.